All right, are we online? This is the first time on, so I'm going to see if this is working. Okay. Seems like it's working, so nobody's in yet. Let me see if I can get some people in here. Oh, hey, we got somebody in there. D. Oh, is that Dan? All right, Dan is here. So, yeah, I'm just posting that I'm online. This is very weird for me. Not used to doing this. I'm not using my normal mic either. I'm just on like a laptop, so there's a ton of background noise, but anyway, should be all good. Yeah, so honestly, this stream has no other purpose than just trying to get, in order to upload videos to Twitch, you have to become an affiliate, and to do that, you have to like stream a certain number of hours on a certain number of days and average a certain number of viewers. It's really not hard to do, but anyway, that's really the sole purpose here. Is I want kind of more backups where, not just backups, but just more presence where I'm uploading the videos to. So anyway, so Dan asks, will I ever add music to some of the videos? Um, I mean, probably like what kind of videos? The audiobooks? You know, I actually have thought. I mean, I've considered the possibility of adding like some kind of light, low volume ambient music in the background of some of the audiobooks. I thought that it would be divisive, and actually, I thought of this probably 6 months ago, and I considered it, and then I was like, well, maybe I'll come back to that thought, and then I haven't actually thought about it since. Um, so thank you for reminding me, I guess. And I thought that if I ever were to do that, I would probably upload a I would upload like a music backed and a non music backed version. Of course, that's double the file space, double the upload time. And I think that just, I struggle as it is to keep up with all the books that I'm trying to read, all the, various texts and things, as well as current event stuff. So that as it is, I'm already like, the stuff just piles up faster than I can possibly get to it. So I will consider it. I mean, if anybody has particular suggestions of like what they would like to hear as far as any kind of musical backing, Mikey is suggesting the Soviet national anthem, but quietly. And maybe. I kind of like the very like straightforward, raw kind of approach, just like we're having a conversation. So like I guess that's kind of my personal preference. I don't think that S4A is ever going to be super high production value, but again, it doesn't, in my opinion, really need to be. I think that quality of information is really the highest priority, and I think even not drowning it in potentially overshadowing elements. Like I think that there's actually sometimes a risk from that. Hello from the anime tanky. Hello to you too. We got 7 people viewing. So anyway, those are kind of some of my thoughts. I like to keep the videos straightforward. Also, like, I just don't always have a mind for doing real high production stuff. I mean, like I said, I'm more of like a writer. I put together my sources. I'll put screenshots, stuff like that. but that tends to be where my mind is. So, just not I'm less of a videographer, if I can speak correctly. That's another thing you'll probably hear in this live stream is, when I do my videos, people sometimes say, I don't know how you don't get a sore throat. And they're not all recorded in one shot. So, for me, the emphasis is on making a good final product. So if I misspeak, I will pause the recording, kind of rewind to the last usable bit, and then redo it, even if it's in the middle of a sentence. So you'll probably hear me, stammering and things that you don't normally hear me doing because I cut it out of the videos. So another question, would I be willing to do a live show with Revolutionary Blackout? I do not know who that is, so possibly after I find out who they are. I don't know. So if you can drop me some links, I can check that out more. Although I guess I can address the question of, I have not been doing any appearances on anybody else's shows for... Actually, I didn't do a single one all during 2021. I did get a few requests to go on other people's shows, and I turned them down. And I just have kind of had that as a blanket policy. They used to be Fred Hampton leftists. Okay. I heard that there was a collective around that kind of broke up, and I know one of the guys went more in like a Jimmy Dore direction. I see him on Twitter a lot. Okay. Fred Hampton leftist, from what I recall, was pretty good, although I don't watch a ton of anybody else's channel one way or another. Like, I'll catch a video here and there, and, I monitor sort of Twitter drama, like other people watching stuff so that I don't have to. But yeah, I remember them being decent, although I think like one of the guys at least went in more of a kind of like populist, like, Jimmy Dore and that whole thing kind of direction. So maybe. Wait, okay. I don't know if the screen just hung up or what, but so got another question. Actually, sorry, I'm looking at too many things at the same time. To finish that answer, and I'll get to the next question from Mikey there. I haven't been doing any appearances anywhere, and there's a number of reasons for that. I, did a couple of appearances back in 2020, the first year of doing this channel, that, I don't know, before I really knew who was who, I did some appearances, and I'll say specifically, well, no, I won't say specifically, but I'm sure that they know who they are. And I don't know, after that, I kind of recoiled. I haven't addressed this topic in a while, but basically, when I got into doing this in 2020, this whole phenomenon of like the right-wing populists somehow calling themselves Marxist-Leninists, that was something that totally caught me off guard. I was not expecting that at all. And I was kind of horrified, actually, that was going on. And I wound up on some shows with some of these people. And I really just pulled back from that completely. And I have not been doing anything since then because, honestly, the channel's been growing pretty steadily on its own. So it's not needed for that reason necessarily. And I've just been trying to just sort of uniformly turn everybody down. I mean, there are people who have invited me on that, all things being equal, I would be happy to speak with. And then other people where it's, less so. And honestly, it's only been like one or two that's been less so. But for now, I've just been kind of not doing any crossovers for the time being. So anyway, that probably answers that question. So the next question is, why are social democrats so terrible sometimes? I would say that the basic answer to that question is because they're basically capitalists. Social democracy, the idea is, the adjective there is social, but the noun is democracy. And when capitalists use the word democracy, they mean capitalism. So what they're talking about is basically capitalism, but with some social type elements. And I'd say that that's why they're so terrible sometimes, is basically they think that you can have, a reformed version of capitalism. I would counter that the only time that there's ever been a, reformed kind of capitalism is under massive pressure, not only from revolutionary, domestic, socialist, and labor movements, but also from international communism, a strong revolutionary international communist movement. The existence of the Soviet Union, and then other countries going socialist after World War II, has put a lot of pressure on the imperialist governments to make concessions. As soon as they felt like they didn't need to make those concessions, they started backing off of them. But social democracy is basically capitalists' version of socialism. It's probably the simplest way I can put it. So why are they so terrible? A lot of the grassroots sockdems that you will encounter on a Twitter or YouTube or whatever, they don't really understand a lot of that. They think that, oh, we got social democracy just by protesting or this and that. It's not really how it works. They're kind of taking the credit for what much more radical factions of the labor movement was actually doing. So Brody the Red is adding, SocDems always forget or deny that social democracy is a temporary mode, and it's always reliant on imperialism. Yeah, absolutely. So the reliance on imperialism, that's kind of part two. Social democracy is temporary because it's a response from capitalists to socialism. They're like, don't overthrow us. Here, we'll make these concessions. We'll make capitalism more livable. But literally, as soon as they feel like they can politically get away with retracting those, they will retract them. Like, they will do that. As far as it being reliant on imperialism, yes, because social democracy, we know from Lenin, capitalism in the 20th century and on became imperialism. In other words, it was no longer the ascendant power that was overthrowing feudalism. It was the stagnant power that had taken over the world and was, just the different imperialists were fighting with each other over who was going to command the biggest shares of, the world market and the colonies and all that stuff. So yeah, social democracy being basically an outgrowth of imperialism, it's just concessions made by imperialists to their domestic populations. It's reliant on imperialism. So why is that significant? Well, in other words, it's reliant on resources extracted by force from poorer, less developed nations. So yeah, the SocDems, this kind of complicates their worldview. I think if they understood the kind of things that we're talking about here, they would not be SocDems anymore. So, and we can just hope that as the next few years go on, we'll see more and more of that. I mean, in the limited non-scientific polls that I've conducted, through S4A, it seems like a lot of people have gone actually socialist in the last few years. Like, this is a marked trend. I mean, it's really pronounced. So, we want to see more of that. We want more SocDems to realize how much of a limited hangout social democracy is and go for the more radical parts of the workers' movement that are actually where the gains come from. So anyway, in between questions here, we got 13 people watching the stream, so welcome to all. I'm just going to throw in to the YouTube a notification that we are live right now so that more people can come and see if they're so inclined. So for anybody who's just dropping in, the let's see, create post. The purpose of this stream, there's not any real particular purpose to it aside from I'm trying to get this Twitch account such that I can upload videos to it, which you have to become an affiliate to do, and you got to stream a certain amount to become an affiliate. So that's why I'm here today. Thank you all for being here as well, because you actually need to average at least 3 viewers. I think we can manage that, 3 viewers. I think I have to stream for 8 hours over 7 different streaming sessions. And did I say average? I just have to do 8 hours of streaming over 7 sessions and have like 3 people watching and hit a certain amount of followers, which the channel already hit. And then I can upload videos. So anyway, what do we got going on in the chat? Dan says, I do believe that we're heading to a one-party fascist state very soon. How fun will that be? Not at all. Not at all. I mean, right now, we do still have some modicum of, freedom. People, have access to social media and things like that. We should not take that for granted and use what we have as much as we possibly can. It's why I do so much content on the channel. I would do more if I could. But yeah, we do need to actually use every opportunity that we have. This gets into kind of a broader conversation about how socialists do need to take advantage of the civil liberties and freedoms that are provided by bourgeois democracy, because bourgeois democracy can turn into bourgeois fascism, and fascism really is an all-out assault on the working class. We do need to enjoy, use, and also defend the bourgeois liberties that, are available. I think that the major problem when that type of dialogue comes up today, say in the United States, is that neither one of the major bourgeois parties, the Democrats or the Republicans, really are full-throated supporters of those civil rights. Like, both of them are incrementally. Obviously, the Republican Party wants to ban books and all that kind of stuff. They're leading the charge towards fascism. But the Democrats are, well, I've been saying this recently, and I think it's probably the best way to put it. The Democratic Party could obliterate the Republican Party at any time by adopting more popular policies, by making more of an alliance with the left. They could drive the Republican Party into just being a regional party, shattered, that would have no appreciable effect on national politics. They refuse to do so. Therefore, we can conclude from that they're the ones keeping the Republicans alive. And, therefore they're not serious about, some of the things that they say are true. For example, that, we're sort of on the brink of a fascist coup and that the Republicans are super far right. Yeah, no doubt. I don't like the Republicans at all. They're horrible. And they're everything that Democrats say that they are and more. But literally the Democrats could destroy them. They're in a singular position to destroy them. And time again, they refuse to do so. So, they can make some accurate statements, kind of pandering to the public about how bad the Republicans are, but they refuse to actually fight them. So here we are in this position where when we as socialists are trying to take advantage of free speech rights and freedom of association to the extent that either of these things are actually rights that we still have, neither one of these parties is truly an ally. So, yes, that's true, and people as far back as Lenin and on have said, we need to defend bourgeois liberties. Actually, the only time that becomes a reactionary position is when socialist revolution becomes actually possible. At that point, standing for bourgeois democracy over socialist revolution, that becomes reactionary at that point. We're not at that point right now, at least in my opinion. So, yeah, standing up for bourgeois freedoms and democracy, great. It's better than bourgeois fascism. It's easier to organize as a socialist. The problem is, when people try to spin that into support for the Democrats, that's where I have an issue. It's a bad situation, no doubt. But anyway, looking at the chat here. So Mikey says, the Republicans are F students, the Dems are D students. It's a dog and pony show. They're truly in it together. That's not to say that every last Democrat is, working in this calculated fashion. However, the party at the highest levels, at the state levels, even at the county levels in most places, they get significant funding from major capitalists. This is like I'm sure going to ruffle a few feathers, but like when CPUSA was putting up blog posts in the 2020 election, the run up to the 2020 election, when they were like, vote against fascism, and they were using a Georgy Dimitrov quote that was like, fascism is the power of finance capital. Okay, well then that's sort of an indictment of the Democrats as well. So anyway, I think that there are many people who vote Democrat that are not fascist, that don't want any of this. But the party, somebody just wrote, we're capitalists, that's just the way it is. Yeah, Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden just recently was going on about my good friend Mitch McConnell, and he's such a great guy. We have political differences, but I enjoy Mitch McConnell on a personal level. First of all, that's a red flag. But this is it. It's class solidarity among capitalists, because that's who controls the Democrats. Trying to make any inroads in that party really has just been a major fail. They've systematically eliminated their liberal wing. I mean, their left liberal wing like a long time ago. So, yeah. What else do we have? So they only care about free speech in certain circumstances. Yeah, I mean it's the whole thing is full of holes. The ruling class of the United States, it's been going more and more right wing for a long time, and that's probably the way it's going to keep going, because again, the Democrats simply refuse to exterminate the Republicans, as they could do. They could if they adopted popular policy. And you know that they know this because they promise to do the popular policies and then they just don't do them. So they know that that's what people want. They know that that's what win. And I would say that if they were to do it, they could turn the Republicans into just a regional party, kick them out of national politics in any meaningful way in probably 3 election cycles. And that's counting midterms. So, yeah, reprehensible. Good word. Dan says, so if there is a fascist takeover, what should we expect under their control? I mean, look at, they're not shy about what the agenda is. Actually, I'm taking a break from doing some studio work right now to do this live stream. I'm working right now on a video. Russell Brand, for people who remember, actor, MTV VJ, and Katy Perry boyfriend. I don't know what their relationship was. Russell Brand. He has a YouTube channel with like 5 million subscribers, and he just did a video supporting the Canadian Freedom Convoy. These are the anti-vax truckers that are making a ruckus, pissing everybody off across Canada. And if you actually look at who's involved with the Freedom Convoy, it's like neo-Nazis, basically. They're anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ+, you name it. So, I mean, what should we expect? More theocratic type bullshit, more assaults on women's rights, on LGBTQ+ rights, all the kind of stuff that you would expect. Plus, attacks on minimum wage and other economic rights, attacks on union organizing, all that kind of stuff. So, abolish the Democratic Party. Yeah, I mean, I think that what the Democrats seem to be trying to avoid is forming an alliance with the left, which actually would exterminate the Republican Party from national politics. And then from there, you would get more of a fight between the left and the Democrats. They want to avoid that. They really want to just keep the conflict between them and the Republicans going. That's much safer for the people who actually fund and control the party. What they really don't want, and that is the 1% and the 0.01%, it's Goldman Sachs, it's Citigroup, the people who picked Obama's cabinet per WikiLeaks, all that stuff. Those are the people who are like, no, you focus on the Republicans. We keep the Republicans around. They just want to perpetuate this indefinitely. But it's not static. Like, as this goes on, the Republicans get more and more extreme, and the whole thing marches to the right. So, I think that the way we would abolish the Democratic Party probably would be, they put down the Republicans whenever they finally are forced to do that, and then the left and the Democrats can hash it out. things could go in another direction, like the Democrats somehow fold and then the left fights the Republicans directly, but then you still have all these centrist, quote unquote, center right Democrats in there fucking things up. So like that, it's that's I think kind of the issue. Plus, I mean, just from like a social development perspective, you would expect the more backward views of the Republicans. It's kind of this neo-feudal, just every prejudice you can imagine. You would expect that to be defeated sooner. I mean, before the sort of mainstream Democrat stuff. So, I don't know, but that's at least my take at the moment. Nothing will fundamentally change, Jack. Eat ice cream. Yeah, listen, fat. This country, he's a capitalist. This country's not left, or whatever Joe Biden would say. So someone else adds, abolish student debt, enact universal health care, raise wages, legalize marijuana, bam, Democratic dynasty for the next decade. Yeah, you know that, I know that. Everyone knows that. You can be damn sure that the Democrats know that. And that's why they don't do it, because they want to preserve their feud with the Republicans, because, peel back the mask of the Democrats, it's the 1%. Now, there's a lot of people in the base who don't want that, and, of course, more people are neither Democrat nor Republican than are either Democrat or Republican. This is what people want. There's all kinds of overwhelmingly popular policies that people want, and the Democrats keep systematically just refusing over and over again. And then, I often say that the only time Democrats are allowed to talk about Medicare for all, for example, is when they're using it as a carrot, to get people to vote for them. And then as soon as they get in, it's like, oh, maybe next year, oh, the time's not right or whatever. Actually, doing a video on this and it's not ready yet, but the California Democrats, just this week, there was a Medicare for all at a state level within California, which would be significant because California is alone, just California, if you broke it out as a country, would want to be one of the biggest economies in the world. So if they adopted, single payer healthcare at the state level, that would be huge, and it would absolutely be a model for more states to join. Maybe there would be even an interstate pool, and then finally, it could be forced to become federal. They pulled the bill again, and they did that. This is the second time in 3 or 4 years that they did that, where they got a bill, and like the progressive nurses and the labor unions and all the usual progressive activists, the kind of Bernie-crat people, supported this whole thing, knocked on doors, raised support, and then the fucking asshole, I forget his name, it's Ash something. I can't remember his last name. I think it starts with a K, but he unilaterally pulled the legislation at the last minute. It didn't get a vote, and they can't resubmit it for another year. So that's the Democrats. That's what they do. And that's even the progressive Democrats. And that's even at a state level. It's not even at the national level. So this is the thing. They know what side their bread's buttered on. That's who controls the party, is the 1%. And they clearly don't want Medicare for all. All right, so a certain base of the Dems doesn't want to eliminate them too. Yeah, I mean, for sure, part of the Democratic base is absolutely right-wing. It's just that the Republican Party has gone too white nationalist for them or whatever, for sure. Actually, Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks, he says this time and time again. He was a Republican forever, and he's still a fucking conservative douchebag, in my opinion. He became a Democrat only during the Bush-Cheney years when the whole Abu Ghraib torture scandal broke. So that was at his, in his development, the Republicans had moved too far right for him. So he became a Democrat. And this is happening more and more. You see people, I think even, wasn't it Bill Kristol, Mr. Neocon? He he was supporting Biden and stuff like that. As the Republicans take on more of a fascist character, there are plenty of bourgeois who are uncomfortable with fascism. They don't think fascism is strictly necessary yet. And so, they're not openly supportive of that. So you'll see more of these conservative Democrats. Absolutely. So, continuing on, Lemon D asks, will this be uploaded anywhere later? Maybe if it's any good. I actually had very low expectations for that. I'm literally just doing this because in order to upload videos to Twitch, you have to stream for a certain amount first. So that's why I'm doing this. But I don't know, if it turns out to be interesting, maybe I will upload it to the YouTube. Mikey says again, if natives did a freedom convoy type thing, they would be shot. Absolutely, I put that point into the video because there's actually been a lot of conflict between the freedom convoy and indigenous nations in Canada. The freedom convoy has been disrespectful to everyone along the way, but particularly indigenous people, and let alone the thing of, indigenous people will go and try to protect their land either from treaty violations or, oil pipeline development or whatever, and the cops are brutal. Meanwhile, towards the freedom convoy, utter double standard. And the cops are, smiling with thumbs up pictures and all that kind of stuff. But that just, it's a far right movement, the freedom convoy. And it just reminds you that what is the right wing? Who are these like neo-Nazi vigilantes anyway? They're just cop wannabes. And from the system's perspective, they're the irregulars. When you have an army, you have the regular troops in uniform with the formal training. Then you have the irregulars who kind of fill in the cracks. The right-wing vigilantes are the irregulars. When even the massive police budget isn't enough to put down protests against capitalism and all of the intertwined, racial injustices and everything, when even all that isn't enough, they need to rely on right-wing vigilantes as well. That's why the double standard. They're basic, cops and clan hand in hand, as the saying goes. So, also Mikey says, we need a strong Republican Party. Yeah, the Dems say that over and over and over again. And they do, because they want to keep the dialectic between the Democrats and the Republicans. They do not want it to shift to the left and the Democrats because, you would have not to do a one-to-one comparison with Russian history because it's not, but, in 1917, after a long struggle against Tsarism, the Tsar was deposed in the February Revolution, and then the bourgeois provisional government was there for all of 9 months before the October Revolution. I think you would get something like that in this country where you have this ultra-reactionary regime now, where basically the neoliberal consensus, since Reagan, maybe since Nixon and Carter, but definitely, don't forget Ford, I guess. But definitely since Reagan, it's been very pronounced, 40 plus years of solidly right-wing government. If we finally dealt with that and did away with that and then started fighting the Dems, people would be like, wait, this is just the same shit, just slightly watered down. And I think that the fight against the Republicans would quickly turn into a fight against the Democrats. And boom, I do think that socialism would become dominant very quickly, shortly thereafter. Again, this isn't Russia 1917, but I think that there are some parallels in terms of just how far back the political relations were, and then when things started moving, how quickly they started moving. Murrow says, yep, they've been pulling away since the left since 68. Absolutely. Comrade Charmander says, here for the first ever S4A stream. Thanks for coming. Honestly, thank you all for coming, because without averaging a certain number of people, S4A Twitch doesn't get, allowed to upload. So you all are definitely part of this. Also, the YouTube channel crossed 6,000 subs last week, I think. It's currently, it's experiencing its strongest month of growth yet. And it's currently at 6160, I think. It's at least 6150. Grew almost 600 subs in the last month. That's really significant. I'm really heartened to see that more and more people are going for this kind of content. It's really not about me. I'm just kind of the DJ here. I am taking the stuff off of Marxist's Internet Archive, reading it, adding what little bit I know to it, helping out with historical context and footnotes, maybe a little vocabulary here and there, and then just trying to apply it to some current events. But it's absolutely all about you. I mean, if people weren't watching, I wouldn't be doing this. And every person that lends their name, their numbers to it, adds a comment, becomes a subscriber, you're making it that much more likely that other people are going to see the content too. And I'm a little bit older than a lot of people out there. Not by like a ton, but, I've got a good decade on most of the people. And let me tell you that in the 2000s, there was not a left like this online. This is honestly like a new development. And, if there had been an S4A when I was coming up, it would have saved me a lot of time because, there was like in the 2000s, a strong libertarian thing. Those fucks were everywhere. And, you wind up having to rub elbows with them back then. And, I wound up in positions where I was like doing activism alongside libertarians. And, I did it for a few years, even though I thought libertarianism was literally, a cure worse than the disease. I couldn't understand why people were doing it. And then, after 2008, there was finally a left starting to emerge, and then Occupy, for what it was worth, in 2011, I was like, thank God, because the alt-right pipeline, people know it from like the YouTube algorithm, but it existed before that. I did anti-war stuff, and then I saw a 9/11 Truth thing, which many people associate just with libertarians now. It wasn't always like that. Libertarians came in with like their government bad, government did 9/11. I think that there's a lot more to that subject, let's just say that. But they came in, they kind of elbowed everybody out. Nobody wants to be associated with libertarians, and people are like, fuck this, I'm leaving. Even though, in my opinion, it's a valid issue, viable topic for discussion. But, going from anti-war to that, and then you wake up one day and you're on a forum where people are doing Holocaust denial posts. Okay, so, this is a pretty right-wing country, and, underground politics, there's a ton of right-wing shit. People it's going more mainstream because of, just social media now. But even before there was social media, it was there. So honestly, thanks to everyone who is helping to build the community and spread the word, because honestly, without it, people wind up, getting into this right-wing populist shit. And, maybe if they hadn't come across that stuff, they wouldn't have adopted some of those views. And I don't know. So it's a good thing, I think, to have more actually socialist resources out there and in a format that people can actually use them, and helping people to find them is super important. So let's see, what else do we have? Great COVID coverage lately. Thank you, Pete. I wish that COVID got more people moving than it does. I mean, I think that people do care about COVID. I think it's important. I think I probably care about it more than a lot of people do, even well-meaning people. A lot of people do, unfortunately, kind of, lacking an alternative or an alternative perspective, kind of get wrapped up in, well, the CDC said this. Well-meaning liberals who have some kind of social conscience will be like, well, I'm trying to trust institutions, and, we don't want to listen to the anti-vax conspiracy nuts. Let's listen to the CDC instead. The problem is that, while CDC is, yes, science-based, quote unquote, it does get compromised because of capitalism. The studies are out there if you want to read the studies, but what gets translated into politics, under Joe Biden, a pretty right-wing Democrat? Well, I did a video on it. Jeff Zients is his COVID czar. Well, who's Jeff Zients? Is he like a public health guy? Is he an epidemiologist? No, he's a fucking venture capitalist. And beyond that, he's like a vulture capitalist. He was from Bain Capital, the Mitt Romney place. So that's Joe Biden's COVID guy. So as far as, being informed by science, I've said the Democrats, they have their own version of climate denial. It's not as severe and overt as what the Republicans do, but it exists. And they have their own form of COVID denial as well. They admit more than the Republicans do, but they fall far short of having an actually good policy that would actually contain the spread. You cannot just let it rip. But anyway, thank you for that, and more COVID stuff coming. So, what else do we have here? I saw a stat the other day that the cumulative U.S. police budget is 180 billion per year. That's more than most countries' militaries. Actually, the chart I saw, if I'm recalling correctly, it was as far as military spending. The U.S. military was first, China was second, and U.S. police were third. And then I think Russia was after that. So it's in that ballpark at least. Charmander says, it's a totally insane amount of funding. I'd love to compare our police funding to China's per capita. Yeah, so I mean, our police funding compared to China's, I mean, the U.S. police funding is just below China's military. So I don't know about China's police budget. I'm sure it's not in excess of their military budget, let alone the fact that they have like 4.5 times the people or whatever it is. So excuse me for a second. Yeah, so not even close. Yet, you get the constant anti-China stuff, being circulated in the bourgeois media. Although somebody pointed out recently how China has maneuvered very successfully around the U.S. The U.S. can't really do anything. They can't do really economic sanctions because China controls the economy. They can't do military sanctions because the U.S. just fucking withdrew from fighting the Taliban. That would not go very well. And basically, China has reduced the U.S. to only being able to propagandize against them. That's all they can do is just say angry words. So that's skillful for sure. So White Riot says, your audiobooks are awesome. I have a 1.5 hour commute every day. Usually listen through 1 or 2 a week. Yeah, absolutely. You're part of the target audience for that. I've had people telling me since the days when there was an S4A Facebook page that, they do deliveries or, they're a trucker or something and spend a lot of time in the car. Some people are like, oh, you should do less long form content. I'm like, yeah, but I know that there's a need for long form content. So I get that. I used to be a courier, spending all day in the car and different things, delivery driver and stuff. It's lonely out there on the road, honestly. So, yeah. More appreciation for the COVID coverage. Thank you. So, Lemon D says, I think that's a good approach. I feel that too much of the left, at least online, but sometimes also in real life, is too heavily focused on personality and clout. Yeah. Yes. Honestly, it's about the movement. If you know anything about socialism, we're relying on uprisings of the masses, which communists are just attempting to give guidance and direction to so that they're successful. That's the idea. It's really not about, and there's so many sort of anarchist, I think, misunderstandings and straw manning of, what is a vanguard party? Vanguard party is just organized people who are really studied on history and theory. So that, why study history? So you don't repeat the mistakes. And theory just comes out of history. It's just like running scientific experiments. You do the experiments, you make the observations, and you come up with theories about what you're observing. It's the exact same thing, just in the social sciences. So that's what we're doing. The vanguard party is just the people who are focused on that, paying a ton of attention to it. And we're not trying to micromanage the movement. That's not the idea. Maybe after you take power, it gets a little bit more in that direction in terms of managing the economy and stuff. But we're relying on uprisings of the masses. This is not about, some douchebag that has, however many people on the stream. Not that numbers aren't important, but it's not about any individual's personality. It's really not the idea. So Lemon D continues, also in my opinion, it's true that people who overemphasize the alt-right pipeline are just too young to have a real point of comparison. It's not really that right-wing politics were less dominant before, it's just that there's an alternative now, in my opinion at least. I'd say partly true. I do think that the algorithm absolutely helps it along. They start people watching a Jordan Peterson video, and the next thing that they know, they're watching Holocaust denial videos, etc. That is a real issue, or some chucklehead sends you a Steven Crowder link, you watch it, or even you just click on it once. The next thing you know, half of your suggested videos are like PragerU and shit like that. So, you know, the technology has aided it. And of course, there's a lot of money behind producing a lot of those videos. So those guys are just pumping out content. There's never a shortage of like far right content being produced. So I think it's both. I mean, it existed prior to the YouTube algorithm. The YouTube algorithm is absolutely speeding up the process. It's accelerating it, I think. So Dems are more willing to talk the talk, but only to advantage themselves. I mean, again, you know, it's not so much about D versus R. You can kind of look at it as like hand puppets. One's on the right hand, one's on the left hand, but they're controlled by the same person. You know, that's not 100% the case. Republicans definitely have some more reactionary backers, but a lot of the, you know, big financial, like just finance capital does fund both parties. Yes, more socially liberal financiers will back the Democrats and will even run campaigns against the Republicans. The point is that the conflict is not one that is designed to ever move beyond the stage of Democrats fighting with Republicans. There's never any final victory intended there. The big financial interests, the big capitalists who control this system, they do not want that conflict to be resolved, and they control the parties enough to make sure that neither party takes real steps to finally resolve it. Even though, you know, Democrats, by adopting popular policy, could exterminate the Republicans, could turn them into a nationally insignificant, purely regional party. They just won't do it. So, yeah. Charmander asks, how do you think this Russia versus U.S. in Ukraine situation will end? You know, I know as much as anybody else does about this. You know, my general feeling is that the U.S. cannot take on China directly, so they are doing the next best thing, which I'm not sure that they can pull that off either, but apparently they think that with NATO's help, they can mount enough of a disruption and intimidation campaign against one of the major allies of China, Russia, or economic partner, and definitely, you know, trying to build the Belt and Road, that whole system, which I think is key. That could massively undermine imperialism for sure. I think that the U.S., in other words, is looking for weak links in the chain, or at least relatively weak links in the chain. So if they can't go after China directly, maybe they'll target, you know, some vulnerable spot along Russia's border. I think that that's probably what's going on there. I don't know how it will end. It's really kind of just shaping up right now, so I don't really know. Fred Engels says, bonjour, Mr. Socialism. Well, bonjour to you too. Welcome to everybody. We got 22 people, and actually, along those lines, I'm just going to let the patrons know, don't want to leave them out, that that we are live. I let Twitter know, and I let YouTube know. Now I'm going to let the patrons know just that we are live. This is actually this is fairly enjoyable so far. All right, posting the link. Yeah, and for people just joining, I'm not intending to do a ton of streaming in the future. Although I don't know if this goes well. Maybe live on Twitch now. If this goes well, maybe it'll be more of a regular thing. But really, it's just kind of to get Twitch so that I can upload videos to it. Where did my Twitch tab go to? There it is. It's kind of cold in the room, so I'm kind of like shivering a little bit. All right, Cad Wayland asks, hi, S4A. Leninism was Marxism developed for the age of imperialism. What are some of the most important developments of Marxism since then? Okay, well, obviously the Chinese Revolution, 1949, massively significant, and some people claim that, you know, Mao's contributions to Marxism-Leninism constitute kind of their own branch. You know, I've not taken a firm stance one way or the other. I know that some people think that, you know, and there are also differences between what some people brand as Maoism versus like Marxism-Leninism with Mao Zedong thought. Uh, but anyway, clearly that's a significant advancement. Beyond that, actually, hang on just one second. Um, Beyond that, I mean, well, let's put it this way. I wish that there had been a. I wish that the wave of revolution started after World War II had continued. What we've kind of seen instead has been a stagnation. Obviously World War I and World War II were major conflicts between imperialists, and they resulted in moments, at least, of pretty strong weakness for various imperialist powers, which resulted in opportunities for revolution, some of which were actually successful. But World War II ended in 1945, so that was a long time ago. And we haven't seen any kind of major moments of weakness of imperialism since that time. I think that this is one of the reasons that the world revolution wave has kind of stagnated. And, for example, you get like Posadas being kind of like an extreme example, talking about how World War III would be nuclear and it would also be the end of capitalism, period. I mean, obviously, capitalism and imperialism being the same thing in this context, imperialism just being the more modern form of capitalism. That was the prediction back in like the 60s and 70s that eventually there would be war, for example, between the USSR and U.S. and like what's today the EU, and that there would be nuclear weapons used, but that this would basically ruin capitalism, and that would be the end. So instead, what happened is the Soviet Union was dismantled, and many people say that China, although the People's Republic of China was not dismantled, that they went very revisionist and kind of backed off of socialism. So I think that the overall tide has kind of stagnated, although capitalism is entering major crises, which we know kind of go hand in hand with intercapitalist conflicts. So is there another round of something like a World War III between U.S., NATO, and Russia, China, and associated allies on each side? Possibly. I don't know. I mean, clearly the U.S. is trying to pick new fights. Like, the U.S. for a long time has just been trying to basically get new colonies, so to speak, or just take over new countries like Iraq for oil and things like that. They haven't really picked on anyone their own size, so to speak, in a long time. If they were to do, and I think that what I'm saying here is probably not news to them either. It's probably they have seen that inter-imperialist conflict is not necessarily in their interest. Like, they had their squabbles in World War I, World War II, and they kind of figured out what the pecking order is within imperialism, and they made their alliances, and those have kind of been more or less set since that time. And they're like, if we're at peace with each other, then we can be at war with socialism. Okay? So that's in all their interests. But since 2008, since the 2020 pandemic crash and everything, capitalism not looking so good. Is war on the horizon, like big war, not just like the U.S. is invading another country for oil war? Is big war on the horizon? Possibly, because that's what happens when capitalism gets unstable. So that wouldn't surprise me. And if that were the case, it absolutely would open up opportunities. So anyway, the question was, I kind of got off on my little pet theory there, but what are some of the most important developments of Marxism since then? I guess what I'm saying is like, I think overall there's been a lot of stagnation. Obviously, there's kind of like a third world movement. You had people who weren't strictly Marxist, like Gaddafi, for example. And I actually do plan to do the Green Book at some point on the channel, which I have not read so far. But, he would fund a lot of different movements. Again, not necessarily socialist, but anti-imperial, anti-West kind of thing. I think, we've been seeing somewhat less of that, which is, I think, where something like China's Belt and Road comes in as one of the most significant projects that could massively, materially undermine imperialism. So, I'm sure that the question is more about ideological developments in Marxism. Excuse me. Uh, I don't know, to be honest. I mean, people will point to, like I mentioned, Mao and Maoism, and somebody else is asking, what are my thoughts on Gonzalo? I'm going to just abstain from this at the current time. I have not really read enough on that subject to really voice strong opinions on that. To me, the overarching conflict is between the U.S. and allied imperialists and China and allies primarily. So as far as struggles going on, hang on one second. Okay. So yeah, as far as struggles going on in smaller, poorer countries who are not major international players, there's a variety of different things. There's many different spin-offs of kind of national liberation struggles. I mean, as far as this constituting like a movement in itself, I don't know. So I guess I see things as being somewhat fundamentally unchanged since sort of Cold War times in that sense, with a lot of qualifications. So we've been going for about an hour. I just need like a minute or two break, and then I'll be back. So write whatever questions you have in the comments. Let people know I'll be right back, but I just need a quick break. We'll come back. I'll do at least another half an hour. All right, I'm back. So what do we have going on in the chat? Uh, so yeah, continuing the thing on Gonzalo, whether he is the sixth head of Marxism like he claimed to be, I don't know. Honestly, like I have no idea. So continuing, we got David is here. Just wanted to say hi. Well, hello back. Lemon D asks or states, there's actually a paper on that by Domenico Lacerdo, who many people here will probably have heard of. Yes, he wrote a biography of Stalin, which I have a copy of and have not had time to read yet, titled "Has China Turned to Capitalism?" Yeah, I mean, you can definitely find a case for you can find a case for either. I've stated before in my videos, I am optimistic on China, obviously with some qualifications. Like clearly, what they're doing today is different from what they were doing a few decades ago. The question is just really, are there strategic reasons for that have to do with socialism, rather than is this just a complete, slow motion abandoning of socialism? I think that's kind of the question. For me, I mean, the way I kind of look at it is things could have turned out more like the USSR, which simply does not exist. It's not like the USSR is still around, but it's very revisionist. It does not exist. Like that system is gone. that didn't happen with China exactly. I mean, there have been changes within China, but 2/3 of the economy, at least by employee count, is public. That's not like a Western social democracy at all. There's a case, I think, either way. I've also seen the case that, China is imperialist. I honestly didn't find a lot of not that none of the resources listed there were compelling, but I found a good half of them not very compelling. So I tend to be more on the side of giving China a break and kind of just watching and waiting, which I think we're going to wind up doing anyway. I don't know that any one of us knows definitively. What they're doing seems to be much better than the U.S. at a minimum and deserves support for that reason. But I don't think that it's. I do hear the case that it's just it's full on imperialist. I don't know. I guess I just haven't been sold on that. Anyway, Kat asks, thank you very much. Love the channel. Thank you. Fred Engels asks, don't you think it would be in the interest of European capital to side with China and Russia against the declining USA? Yeah, I think the USA is circling the drain, although there's a lot of far-right elements in European capital too. So that's something to keep in mind. I guess keep in mind that really nothing about capitalism in the 21st century is particularly rational or in anyone's self-interest. It's being propped up with enormous amounts of force. And, yes, it's rational from the class interests of private property holders, but I don't know. I don't know how much longer they can hold on. That's not going to stop them from trying. But so there are a lot of far-right elements within European capital and therefore European politics. For example, I was just doing the video on the Freedom Convoy 2022 in Canada, and there was discussion in that of the Yellow Vest movement in Canada. So I talked for a couple of minutes in the video about populist movements and how Yellow Vests came out of France, excuse me, which France has a very long history of mass demonstrations, whether it's mass strikes or other kinds of they get people in the streets in a way that we just don't see, for example, in the United States. The Yellow Vest movement came out of that, which is not a socialist movement, it's more of a populist movement. However, because France, compared to the U.S. or Canada, has a relatively stronger, left movement, it's less likely there that kind of populism will go fascist per se. That is relative compared to the threat of a fascist or a populist movement in the U.S. and Canada having more of that far-right character. I think that just the presence of more left-wing elements in, say, France particularly, will keep that a little bit more balanced between the left and the right, branches of populism. But in the Canadian context, it's much more of a right-wing thing. But anyway, the point there was that there are significant right-wing elements within it. And, you look at the 2016 election, which was between Macron and Le Pen. It was very much like the Clinton-Trump election in that you had the center-right character, Clinton or Macron, versus a far-right character, Le Pen or Trump. And so, the far-right movement, it's significant. And you look at that with the anti-lockdown protests in Holland and Denmark and these other places. Don't underestimate it, I guess. Although you're right, for the long term, it's, clearly China is going to be a more stable presence than the United States. I think that that's clear. So, yes, I would say it would be in the interest of European capital to side with China and Russia against the U.S. And I'm sure that they will try to influence China as well to be more friendly to capital. We will see what China will do. I mean, in that question of, important ideologies and movements since Marxism-Leninism came about a century ago, something we used to see more of that I was touching on was the funding and training of various national liberation movements. China really does less of that. I think that, the charitable approach is saying they are backing off of that, which arguably didn't serve the USSR all that well in the long run. I think that there's probably a counter argument to that as well. But China's not taking that approach, and they're saying, well, we're going to undermine imperialism, if in fact that's what they're doing, by developing alternative infrastructure so that people are no longer forced to trade, on IMF World Bank terms, which are actual debt traps. What China does, I do not think are debt traps. I don't think that it stacks up even remotely. So they're trying to do that. It's less of like active aid for like guerrilla insurrection, type of situations. And some people are, particularly people who are more in the like Maoist type of headspace are very much against that. From that perspective, I can understand that. I think that it's going to be 10 years or so before we really see how all this shakes out. Next question, any recommended reading for learning more about the Cuba Revolution and or Che or Castro? It's not an area of expertise of mine. I do have several audiobooks up on the channel from Che and from Castro, and I'm planning to do more. So no, as far as like, a volume that somebody wrote about them, unfortunately, no, I don't really have any recommendations. If anybody does in the comments, feel free to share. Next question. Do I have some hope with Gen Z with the way that socialism is becoming popular, or is it really just social democracy? I think it's both. I saw the Communist Party saying that they're growing fast, but they're not even 10,000 people, I don't think. Yeah, so if you're talking about the Communist Party USA, yeah, I mean, I've seen that too. They do report that, there have been a lot of people joining. I think that you have a massive bottleneck at the head of CPUSA in terms of like, when Joe Sims, I plan on doing another video, but it just makes me like shake my head. I kind of have to like face palm here. It's like, what are you doing? They're writing articles about, Joe Biden has won the presidency and one phase of the anti-right struggle has been complete, the battle for the presidency. And it's like, yeah, except that that phase is going to be followed by the phase where the Democrats do nothing and then hand power back over to the Republicans. In case you haven't noticed, it's just been like a merry-go-round for the last like 40 years. So anyway, that's the Communist Party USA. I'm sure they're doing some good things as well, but I think that there's a major bottleneck there. So I mean, as far as, is it really just social democracy? I mean, I'm sure you're not referring to the CPUSA themselves, although arguably you could make a case for that as well. So is socialism becoming more popular? Yes, it was virtually not popular at all. So coming up from like 0 or single digits, it's definitely a lot more popular than it was. And I think that growth is real. I think, though, it's not at critical mass yet. I don't think it's anywhere near that. I use the hashtag Revolution 2030 to represent my concept that I think that if Marxists lean in really hard in the 2020s, we can have a public moment by 2030. I don't know that I would put it that much sooner than that. It could be a little sooner than that. I don't know. These are just my estimations. But basically, where I'm coming from in saying that is the libertarians pushed hard in the 90s and 2000s, and then they had a big national moment in 2010 with the Tea Party. Libertarianism became a household term at that point. Then in the 2010s, I think that this was a decade of SOCDEMs. You had the Young Turks and Bernie and all that stuff, and a lot of this went really mainstream, arguably culminating in the Bernie thing in 2020 when he, rolled over yet again for his good friend Joe. I think that if Marxists play our cards right, this could be the Marxist decade, culminating in, some type of a moment in 2030. That's kind of the rough, thing that I'm shooting for. So I don't think we're going to see results, massive results this year or next year or even the year after that. Maybe as we get into 2037, 38, or 2027, 28, you'll see some more stuff happening. But I think it's still in its, maybe not infancy, but toddler kind of years. That's where I think we're at. Unelectable Airwaves says, what's up, chat? Yeah, we're up to 31 people watching. That's kind of cool for the first ever S4A stream that I'm kind of just doing to get the Twitch channel broken in and make affiliate so that I can start uploading stuff. Thank you all for participating in that. And, I think these are good questions as well. Charmander says, I regained hope in China with their COVID policies. Same with Vietnam. Yeah, I agree. I think that this is an issue for anyone paying attention that shows the stark contrast. I mean, some other countries, mostly island countries like Japan, Thailand, Australia, New Zealand, where incidentally, or maybe not, there is significant Chinese influence. They also have handled COVID pretty well. It helps when you don't have like a land-based border to deal with. Much easier to control, who's coming into the country and what germs are coming into the country in a pandemic. But yeah, I think China's pandemic response is amazing. They're hosting the Olympics right now, and basically what they did is they set up a bubble. So it's like within this bubble, people are allowed to, people from other countries are allowed to come in. Once you get cleared to be in the bubble, it's not the same as being cleared to just go freely throughout the country. You get cleared to be in the bubble. Within the bubble, all the workers are in full PPE gear, including like bartenders. It's pretty amazing, which of course is leading, xenophobic, Western, China Cold Warriors journalists to write, it's so dystopian and all this kind of stuff. Like, whatever, just shut up. Nobody cares, because 1 million people have died of COVID. Officially 900,000 people have died in the U.S. from COVID, and unofficially certainly more than that. Yeah, maybe nobody cares what the U.S. has to say about that, and maybe what you're calling dystopian is actually, a government that actually gives some amount of shits about non-millionaire people, which I know is a tough concept for the U.S., but anyway, I agree. I do think that, and I've just seen less of Vietnam's response. I mean, I've heard, I like Luna Oi's channel, so I do watch that sometimes, and I've seen the stats. They also have a very good COVID response. I've just seen less actual footage from it. But I mean, China, they have an outbreak. What's their response? Within 5 or 10 days, they built a 6,000 bed hospital. In the U.S., they closed down hospitals because it's not profitable not to run at full capacity. It's night and day. And I do hope that, lots of people pay attention to that and that this becomes kind of a model. Then again, I mean, this is one of the reasons that the U.S. is so invested in having people not care about the COVID outcomes, because they're so fucking bad at it. And if people did start to care, they would start to actually put pressure on the U.S. government to do more, and then, it could snowball into, additional agitation against the system as a whole. Anyway, next question. Do I have any particular leftist orgs in the U.S. that I think are doing the best work? No. That's not to say that no one is doing good work. My policy is I'm not endorsing any organizations. What I say, I've said in a couple of, 10 or 15 minute speeches or, conversations that I've had on that particular topic, is orgs are hard. Being in a good org can be a great experience, and you can get really good stuff done and learn a lot about organizing and about how to get people motivated in a positive way. Being in a bad org can be one of the worst experiences of your life. It can be devastating. So the last thing I want to be doing at the present time is recommending one org that I erroneously have some, idea that it's doing really good work. Turns out, then some major scandal comes out 3 months later. I think that, no, I don't see any orgs that I know for sure are definitely great and don't have any major problems, and I can definitely recommend them. That's not to say that there aren't any. I just don't know what they are, if there are. So what I've been saying, and I'm welcome to push back on this, honestly, is particularly for people, and recall what I was saying before about my concept of Rev 2030. I think we're still kind of in the early years of this. I think we're still attracting people to the movement as, a whole. I think we're still just starting to get the numbers up barely. I think that while the numbers are still low, all the orgs are still kind of small. We just don't know what is going to shake out of all this yet. And while we're in that kind of a situation, if you're going to go for one small org, you know, I mean, then you figure that out. And if you feel called to one, do it. Kind of what I would prefer, though, is if people just got some kind of basic experience with being in an organization. So I have been recommending something that's a little more mass oriented, like a DSA or a Greens. Now, these are not Marxist organizations. However, I think that particularly after Howie Hawkins and the Green Party, yes, they still have their right wing and, you know, kind of hippie capitalist, green capitalist type of stuff, as well as some kind of populist, contrarian, reactionary, weird stuff as well. Any organization has a left and a right wing, particularly at this point where the class struggle is just really starting to intensify in a major way. Same thing with DSA. There, you're going to be up more against social democrats, you know, these kind of Kyle Kalinske types, people like that, I think is more what you're going to find. Like in the Green Party, it's more kind of like, you know, the wild outside the box people. I think in a DSA, you're going to find more, you know, button down, kind of more preppy types. And, you know, so it'll be a different fight. But get in there and fight. And another reason why I've steered people towards these, at least for the time being, and I will continue to qualify that in a moment, is that, oh, now I lost my train of thought. Oh, well. Try to juggle too many thought scraps at once here. Oh, yeah, is that if you get into a real small organization and have a bad time, I mean, I've seen people get into small orgs where they didn't get any work done and they had like traumatic interpersonal experiences and it turned them off to being in an org for like years on end. I really don't think that that is helpful at the particular, you know, state of the movement. I don't think at this particular time that's a good thing. I'd rather people get experience in more of a mass org where they're less likely to have some kind of like cult-like experience. And then, you know, after, when I say join this thing, I don't mean stay in it for the rest of your life. I mean join it for 6 months or a year or two, get the experience, meet some people, network, and then you can take that experience and your contacts. And as the movement grows, like I said, this is a moving target. People are being actively drawn to the movement. It's growing, not shrinking right now. As you meet more people, maybe then you will reach a critical mass of like-minded, you know, maybe then the left wing of DSA can break off and be something significant on its own. So I think that too many people have the idea that when you're joining an org, it has to be the thing that exactly matches your politics on every single last tiny little issue. That is just not how it works. That's how Trotskyist organizations kind of work. Like if they have the slightest disagreement, they will split. And so you wind up with 59 orgs that each have 4 people in them. That's useless. That's useless. So I don't want to see that. I'd rather people get into more of a mass org that actually has some ties to the community, that's actually doing some kind of work, and then going from there. You know, if you are able to like, you know, if you know, fight the right wing also of your organization. Like if you can't fight the right wing of DSA, can you actually fight anyone? That's a question I would put out there, food for thought. So anyway, you know, that's kind of my only recommendation right now. That could change in a few years if, like I said, when more people join the movement and more leftist orgs actually make real inroads with the masses, which I do not think has really happened yet. And again, I think Greens and DSA, with the largest membership, are doing the most actual IRL work. If something else pops up like that, that is better, and I think that that probably will happen in the coming years, I will reevaluate this policy. But as of, you know, early 2022, I think if somebody's looking to get started, you know, look for a healthy organization, one where people seem reasonably happy to be there and aren't at each other's throats, if I can speak. That they get back to you fairly quickly. Sometimes you'll contact an org and they get back to you 6 weeks later. Yeah, that's probably a struggling org or a dysfunctional org. I would not join that org personally. And I know that some people in orgs take, you know, offense at saying that. I've been in orgs that take, you know, that long to reply to people. they're not healthy orgs, and I wouldn't recommend that people join them. So, no, I can't recommend that. I think that we need to set higher standards for the movement. I think that we will be able to achieve higher standards as the movement goes on, picks up more people. But I don't think that lots of tiny little groups, kind of bickering with each other is going to be helpful. I think we need to move away from that. That's been the state of the left for like a super long time. I don't think we can really stand doing that any longer. Anyway, hopefully that's helpful. If I left anything out, probably far from leaving anything out, I probably went on way too long on that question. So let me keep going on. Lemon D says, on Cuba, anything by Arnold August is a good start. Okay, I'll make a note of that because I'm not familiar with Arnold August. And then on Che himself, Motorcycle Diaries or the biography just titled Che. Okay. So Based God Flashy says, support for national liberation movements wasn't a hindrance to the USSR. It was one of its greatest assets. Honestly, I mean, I'm more inclined to agree with that. I know that I don't think that component specifically was a hindrance. I think that more they took a very confrontational attitude towards the United States when the United States was kind of at its strongest. I think that was more the problem. I'm not trying to like Monday morning quarterback here at all. I think that they did a tremendous amount. But the fact is, the destruction of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries was a pretty bad setback for world socialism. So however that could have been avoided, and yeah, arguably it wasn't really tied to the support for national liberation movements. I'm not saying that it was. I'm just saying that's an argument you can encounter out there. No, I do think though that some of the again, it's like it's hard to walk that line of like being a Marxist and supporting class struggle and national liberation, etc., without being directly antagonistic to the biggest imperialist power at its strongest point. How do you walk that line? Was that the problem? I mean, definitely the military contest that the USSR got into with the USA during the Cold War was a huge problem. Was it the USSR's fault? Obviously, like the USA is the imperialist power here. Were there things that could have been done differently that might have not resulted in the destruction of the USSR? Yes. Do they also encompass things that don't have anything to do with those topics? Also, yes. But anyway, whatever the case, I think China is definitely trying to avoid that. And their policy of, look, we're here for world peace. We're here for cooperative development. I think that given the nature of imperialist propaganda, it's a fairly sensible approach. So anyway, cursory, those are my interpretations. None of this is set in stone. As Marxists, we always want to keep looking at evidence and evaluating situations for what is there. All right, so continuing. Lemon D, also the economic war against Cuba by Salim Lamrani is a good one. Thank you for the recommendation. Also, We Are Cuba by Helen Yaffe. Murrow says to Lemon D, there was a movie made on Che in Cuba within the past 10 years. I'm not sure what that one was. Speaking of CPUSA, what are thoughts on PCUSA? Are they as bad as or what? So PCUSA is, from my understanding, a group that split off from CPUSA, and I understand from the founding, story that I heard about it, they split off from CPUSA because of CPUSA's, long-standing reputation for revisionism and, kind of being an appendage of the Democratic Party or something like that. So that's my understanding of PCUSA, is they kind of broke away from CPUSA to do, to be the revolutionary party that CPUSA says that it is, and that is basically the story there. I did some videos on a candidate that they ran for Congress. I was thoroughly unimpressed with the way that they handled that situation. And also Comrade Denki Kang, who was a member of PCUSA, said that they basically micromanaged their YouTube channel into oblivion. Also, when the controversy about their candidate kind of blew up and people started talking about it in their org, I think they just deleted the Discord server. That was according to Danky Kang, if I have the story correctly. So when I talk about small organizations, again, if we want to say CPUSA is small because it has 10,000 members or whatever it has, PCUSA is much smaller from my understanding, like maybe under 1,000 even. So again, are they, the group that is going to eventually, as more people join the movement, get its act together, shape up, and become the party of the proletariat? It's possible. It's also possible that some not yet formed party becomes that party. I don't know. What I see is that the overall institutions of the working class in the United States have been decimated. I think for all of his flaws, Chris Hedges does a pretty decent narrative on this, pretty convincing, compelling narrative on this, that whether it's labor unions, public universities, whatever it is, they have been gutted throughout the Cold War and the neoliberal period. So if we understand the role of the party as being the thing that gives direction to the working class, like it's ultimately sort of the brain of all the working class organizations. Okay, great, but you also need a body. And if we don't have the labor unions and all the other things, the tenants unions, community unions, solidarity networks, mutual aid networks, then the brain is controlling just a little finger. It's not going to be able to do very much. We need to rebuild all those things. So I would much rather people get involved with things that are actually, correct some of the deficits of the left that have been existing for a while, that it's too insular, that it's a bunch of nerds, sitting in a room talking about books, that there aren't enough ties to the community, that, people in the community look at, the McDonald's logo or their grocery store logo or, other stuff that has meaning in their everyday life and mine as well. But, the logo of a political party or of their labor union may not have that same import. When we get to a point where we have contributed to working class organizations that are really, truly meaningful to the masses and that these organizations are capable of, getting up and launching uprisings and mass actions on their own, that's to me where a party comes in as, giving direction to that. That's not to say you can't start building it now, not at all. But the idea, in other words, is to build broad-based things that have real significance to working people, that, then once you have people's trust and everything, actually I say once, it's not like a cause and effect thing. I mean, once you have made your presence indispensable to people and convinced them of the virtue of socialist politics and that that's why you're out there, that this is, a movement of and for the working class, that's when the party of the proletariat starts having some actual influence. And I just don't see that happening with tiny little groups of people who can't really even manage small campaigns very effectively without kind of duplicating massive bourgeois errors, in my opinion. So, yeah, to me, the emphasis, at least for right now, is, people, and I've said this before, while you're joining the mass organizations and helping to build those up, absolutely, if you feel drawn to a small group, like you just feel like it really clicks with you, then go for it. I'm not trying to hold anybody back from doing that, but I'm also not trying to shove people into that. I think that there are kind of other priorities. So Charmander adds to that, I saw PCUSA saying that they're a home for socialist American patriots. Yes, that was kind of the gist I got as well, that this was kind of like a manifestation of all that toxic, extremely online crap that we have thankfully seen more of a pushback against in this past year, in 2021. It's actually a good year for pushing back against that kind of stuff. I haven't seen a lot from PCUSA since that time, but I'm not really sure the state of that organization right now. Unelectable Airwave says the chocolate fountain attendant just smiled at me, just like 1984. Yeah, that's that article about the Chinese Olympics, where it's like inside the bubble where they're actually disinfecting everything. The person by the chocolate fountain who, yes, has full PPE gear on, is like, the journalist was writing an article like, it's so dystopian, they're trying to force me to use the chocolate fountain. It's just like, can you stop screeching for 3 seconds? So Funky Lollipop adds, capitalism is a hell of a drug. Indeed it is. It has ruined many a movement and corrupted many an individual. White Riot says, I think your take on not endorsing a specific org is very reasonable. I understand what you're saying. Unelectable Airwave says, our DSA chapter here in Chicago is pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I've seen DSA do actually useful work in my area as well. I think that there's definitely a place, until they start like purging the Marxists, I think that that is a place you can actually go do stuff. Nobody's saying make it the only thing that you're doing, but we should be doing everything that we can while we have the ability to do it. And no doubt, people rightly will say we can't pull the Democrats left. Like, you're not going to pull Joe Biden left, although some people, insist that you can. I think you can actually pull DSA members left, at least the vast majority of them. And if we're not out there putting out the positions, then they're going to be listening to their right wing, So it's like, pick your battles. Can you pull people left? Yes. Can you pull people who are directly backed by the, big bourgeoisie like Nancy Pelosi left? No. But, understanding kind of the dimensions and using the forums that are actually available to us where we can do something. I'm not trying to say to anybody, waste your time. Like, if you get in and try to do it and it's an utter waste of time, then don't waste your time. Go put your time and effort into something better. But I've seen many instances where there's something possible there. Reading for Liberation says, hello. White Riot adds, mine in Philly was pretty awful. I guess DSA, until new leadership was elected last year. It's improved immensely in the last 10 months or so. That's kind of what I'm saying. I don't think that DSA is going to be like the vehicle of the revolution, but right now it is an organization where a lot of action is taking place, and you want to be where the action is. When I was talking about the libertarians back in the 2000s, I had to kind of hold my nose and see what I could do there, because it's where the action was. Now, eventually, thankfully, more action opened up in the anti-bailout and what would eventually become Occupy. Obviously, the movement still had a long way to go from that point. But it was like, prior to that, we didn't even have that. So for me, it was like, thank God I can stop working with these people, because something better that was also mass-oriented came along. But, totally use what you can. And I mean, honestly, if there had been DSA on the level that it is now versus, like what was actually existing in 2000, which was not 2000, but like 05, 07. It's just, anyway, I think it's worlds better. There's action there. There's people interested in this stuff. And, I don't consider myself a bread tuber, but for example, every video that I make, like, I don't post Stalin over there, but any video I make that I think I can get kind of like BreadTube Radlibs to listen to, I will give them to. And you know what? Or I will give to them. And you know what? A lot of them do listen, actually. Like, in the actual BreadTube, like, Reddit sub, I post Lenin all the time. It never gets shouted down. It gets upvoted. I post any kind of current events video that I can. And you know what? Those people, not every last one of them, but a good amount of them, if we can get them into Lenin and, Mao, and if we can do that, we should be trying to do that. Turning to fucking total reactionaries, not really so much, but if you can turn to people who already consider themselves on the left, but are kind of doing it wrong or doing it with an imperialist bias, and you can get them to shake that imperialist bias, great. I know it's not going to happen overnight, but I think we should kind of try to do that. Otherwise, where do you think the support is going to come from? All right. Reading for Liberation adds, my internet is choppy as hell, otherwise I'd stay around. Well, thank you for dropping in. Appreciate it. Fred Engels said, I had Trotskyists stalking and begging me to join their org for more than a year. They really are cult-like. Thank you. Like, cue the Steve Carell, thank you gif. That was nerdy and lame, but pardon me. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, my first exposure was the ISO, for anyone who remembers the ISO, International Socialist Organization. Insufferable. They went down in, I think, 2018 due to a scandal relating to how they handled allegations of, like, sexual misconduct. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm in a cold room. My nose is kind of running. I'm like, it keeps making me having to clear my throat. Yeah, awful. I mean, I remember being in an anti-war conference, and listening to like an ISO speaker, and I was literally just like, this guy is turning me off to socialism so much that like if they ever came to power, I'd probably be among their first opponents. It was just awful. Trotsky is it's something else, I'll tell you. And I will. This is also just totally needless, but I'll take the shot anyway. The biggest thing that bothers me about Trotskyism, it is so sectarian in my opinion. In terms of like, so I often say in the videos on the channel that opportunism is when you work with people you shouldn't be working with because they have fundamentally opposed interests, like material interests. So like when proletarians work with the bourgeoisie, that's opportunism, and 99 times out of 100 don't do that. Not even sure what the other time is. Maybe in like an anti-fascist coalition of some kind. But yeah, you generally don't want to do that. It's opportunism. It's going to totally corrupt your movement, lead it astray. But then sectarianism is the other side. It's when you won't work with people with whom you don't have a fundamental conflict. To me, this is Trotskyism, like in a nutshell. It just, please shut up about Stalinism. For fuck's sake, this is relevant to no one but you anymore. It's anti-USSR propaganda, and the worst part, and this is really the heart of it, if Trotsky had been in charge, probably most of the things would have been very similar. And a lot of the complaints from Trotsky are like, oh, I just would have done it, in a different way. God, I can't stand that. Anyway, but yeah, that was some of my first real-life exposure to socialism, and it was fucking awful. All right, so continuing, Aya says hello. Hello, Aya. White Riot, I've been able to get involved with more campaigns in the last 8 months than in the previous 4 years combined. Definitely on the right track, and it's way farther to the left than the national org as a whole. So that is the local DSA. Yeah, that's the other thing. It is somewhat decentralized, so it's going to be different from place to place. Get in there, see if your chapter is somewhere you can meet people, spread some ideas, and get involved in some real-life community work. If you can't, then you probably have at least met... let me just make this point as far as meeting people. If you get in there and you have those thoughts, odds are you're not the only person, right? It's like being in a bad workplace if you're starting a union campaign. If you're like noticing that your workplace is totally fucked up, odds are you're not the only person. And then the task then in terms of organizing is, surreptitiously figuring out who's most likely to be sympathetic and doing some, dropping some hints. And then after you've got a little confirmation that they are also disgruntled, starting to do some one-on-ones a little bit more head-on, outside of the earshot of management. Same thing if you're in a DSA, like find your allies and start organizing like a Marxist bloc within your thing. And you might be surprised how much you can do. Like I said, if you can't do it in DSA, where the fuck do you think you can do it? Food for thought. Cad says, really enjoyed Socialism Betrayed by Roger Kieran and Thomas Kenny on the reasons for USSR collapse. Somebody recommended that to me recently, and I have not read it yet. So I will keep that one on the list. Base God Flashy, can you read Mao's work titled Peaceful Coexistence, Two Diametrically Opposed Policies? In it, Mao goes over the difference between Lenin and Stalin's conception of it versus the revisionist Khrushchevite and what would also become the Dungist conception. So, yes. Sorry, I keep biting my cheek and it goes, it's because the headphones are like, I have one side of the headphones on my cheek and it keeps pressing my cheek into my teeth. Let's see if I can move that. Anyway, yes. Actually, I have a bunch of, see, it worked that time. I said yes. I read, I've been reading more Mao. I mean, I've been focusing on kind of Lenin in particular recently. I'm trying to roughly do a chronological treatment of all these works, although obviously you can't do it. You got to skip around somewhat. I'm doing some more Mao from like the 20s, 30s, 40s in the next month or so. When we get up to more like the 50s and 60s, and I would say I'm finishing up what I'm doing now, and then I plan to start on kind of a major passage of early stuff like Marx and Engels, 1860s, 70s, 80s. I want to do like a big chunk of that because there's a lot of good stuff there that I have not covered yet. The next thing is, because I've already covered a lot of 1900s, 19 teens, early 1920s through the many Lenin readings that I've done, I'm going to kind of skip that and go from Marx and Engels into the Trotsky Stalin, like later 20s and 1930s stuff. So those are kind of the two next major things. Obviously, right after that, Stalin, dies in the 1950s, and then we get de-Stalinization. Also at the same time, China's Revolution, 1949, you get the rise of Mao and the People's Republic of China. So I will be covering a lot of like those kind of anti-revisionist and anti-Khrushchev things that came out of the 60s in particular in that next third chunk of stuff. But it will take me a little bit of time to get there. That said, I am reading some earlier Mao right now, and I might throw in something like that, like the file on the phony socialism. I know that that's one of them. And again, for anybody, we were talking about China before, and we were talking about different perspectives on what were the USSR's mistakes. The point is not necessarily for everyone to... I mean, you're going to form your own opinions as you go along your education. That's good. I mean, it means you're developing, you're taking in information and you're making informed decisions and developing informed opinions off of that. That's just a matter of course. I think what we shouldn't do is let it become overly divisive. I mean, obviously there are some significant differences which can't be ignored, but the main thing we need to do today is solve the political problems that are in front of us. But how do we understand the history of socialism up to this point, which is key for understanding our position within the socialist movement and socialist history today? We have to look at all the different strains of it. I mean, I've been reading Posadist. Doesn't mean that I'm a Posadist. I will be covering Trotsky. It doesn't mean I'm a Trotskyist, but you have to kind of understand these things to know. I think I'm probably not a Maoist, although do Maoists have some good insights? Yeah, probably. This is why you got to read a wide variety of stuff. And it's kind of from this perspective. That said, I say that now, and that's probably the case. You never know. I have not read a ton from that. I do think probably there is... actually, you know what? I'm just going to leave that one. I'm going to leave that one alone entirely. I think that these things get discussed to the exclusion of much more important questions facing us today. Not that there aren't important lessons to be learned from these historical turning points. There absolutely are. But I think that sometimes they do get overlooked in favor of or rather than looking at what do we do now. But yes, to answer your question, yes, I will be reading that stuff. Maybe some of it now, but probably more of it in that next kind of third chunk of things that I have planned. All right. Unelectable Airwaves says, I sometimes wish that there was more central authority nationwide, but being decentralized has helped DSA to grow. It's up to nearly 100,000 dues-paying members now. I mean, that's huge growth. We were talking about, is the movement growing? Yes. This is its growth today. What I think is, 4 or 5 years from now, we're going to be in a really different position. New orgs will exist which don't exist now. There will just have been a lot of history that has not happened yet. So I think it's our best bet for developing a single nationwide org. Yeah, and again, remember, these things grow, and it could be that DSA reaches a certain point, and then internal contradictions within it lead to some kind of a split, and then one of the things that comes out of that split becomes the thing. So it may not be DSA as we know it now, but it could be, like I said, maybe the left wing, just sort of speaking generally. All right, someone is coming in saying, test, we can hear you. Your test is successful. All right. White says, yeah, right now I think that the job continues to be to bring as many people into the org as possible and educate them and push them left. That is pretty much what I'm doing with my channel, although I'm not connected with an org. And, I'm not, like I said, aside from just join something big, and I'm not blind, so I see that things like DSA or Greens are some of the bigger things. Also, I haven't mentioned this. I say it all the time whenever I mention this, and I think I've gotten used to this. We're already discussing the Democratic Party. The Green Party obviously is not going to be endorsing Democrats, except for a few weird instances where they will just openly state like, yeah, well, we're running, but, we back the Dems. Like, don't say that shit. We can't stand that. But DSA will take more of an approach, or the right wing of DSA will take more of an approach of endorsing Democrats. Fight that tooth and nail for exactly the reason that I was talking about before. It's not a good thing, and I think that we need an independent left. Getting involved with the Democrats, particularly at this stage, they're going to pull you right. You're not going to pull them left. I think that also causes them to lose some amount of credibility with people who are like, aren't you just the Democrats? Yeah, absolutely fight that. All right, White Right's got to run. Thanks for dropping in. We'll see you next time. So, I cannot read your name. I'm sorry. I gotta squint. There's a lot of I's and L's in a row. Gengaris Timilim Epius. I'm sorry, I really butchered that, which is why I didn't want to attempt it, but now I've attempted it. The only ML org near me is either CPUSA or Workers' World Party. I will never join CPUSA. Workers' World Party I have bad vibes about due to Caleb Maupin being a member for 7 years, and it's a neo-trot org. What should I do? So the answer is maybe now is not the time for you to join an ML org. There are plenty of other orgs I'm sure you can join, and you can stay in contact with other MLs, and maybe the ML org that is going to eventually emerge in the US doesn't exist yet. That's a possibility. You're not wrong, I think, that it is a neo-trot org. Like, they call themselves Marxist and Leninist, or I think PSL does. PSL having emerged from a split within Workers' World Party, as far as I understand. There's this huge taboo in the United States against, embracing the Stalin years. And I think that is largely just due to the position that Cold War propaganda has, forced U.S. socialists into. And so all these organizations, which otherwise, you can see they don't even want to be Trotskyists. They just can't openly embrace Stalin. It's so fucking weird. Is the Workers' World Party worth joining? I don't know, maybe. I mean, I think you could join it and see if you think it's worthwhile and then report back. That would probably be my best advice there. Or if you get, if you start to join, they take, 2 months to get back to you. They're not real active. I don't know, it might not be worth your time. So, if you don't like the only options near you, maybe don't join. So people might be wondering, well, why are you saying join more of a mass org that isn't explicitly Marxist? Whereas, because you can get in there and fight versus, joining more of a Marxist org and, why can't you fight in there? Because I think that there's a difference between getting involved in a mass org that is more kind of, liberal or moderately socialist in tone, and going in knowing that you have to fight versus getting involved in an org that has as much hubris as, for example, CPUSA has, where any time you criticize them, it's just constant fucking gaslighting and ad homs. They're like, no, we're the real communists, and, you criticized us, therefore you're anti-communist, or you're a liar, or blah, blah, blah. If I sound a little anti-CPUSA, let's just say I think they have a long way to go. If they're ever going to make it. I mean, people have said bad shit about CPUSA for a long time. I don't know enough to say for sure one way or another about that. I really don't. I can only say I've been not that impressed with a lot of what I've seen, so I can understand that. But people will be like, well, they're actually Marxist. Why wouldn't we join that and fight? Well, because, I don't know, look at it from, let's say that the org is hypothetically is as controlled as some people say. We've seen that they do keep a very tight control on the narrative of what's going on within that org. Do you even have the leeway to do that fight, I guess is what I'm saying, when they're just going to call you anti-communist? So anyway, hopefully folks can follow along. If you need clarification on that, I'm happy to provide it. Let's see. Somebody says, why would you never join CPUSA? If only DSA was in my area, I'd join. Kind of address that. 69 Tier says, hey, S4A, hey to you. Red Wizard says, I think more people are receptive to socialist politics now with every passing day, considering the failure of Dems and liberals. Absolutely. Bush and Cheney were in from 2001 to 2009, and the entire thing from start to finish was a full-on disaster and basically just a right-wing coup. Utterly just rolled back progress, you name it, military, like foreign policy, domestic policy, whatever. 9/11 at the beginning, 2008 crash at the end, and the bailout. Horrible, horrible time. You could have elected anybody after the Bush Cheney moment. They elect Obama on hope and change. It's a total, total, total scam. And people realized it. And a lot of people were very disillusioned. I think that this led to the rise of the Bernie Sanders campaign. These people are like, hey, Democrats lie. Here's this guy who's not a Democrat. Bernie Sanders was an independent, coming in, trying to, storm the gates, gate crash, and bring in some progressive policies. A lot of people could get on board with that. I know I could. Unfortunately, he wound up, when push came to shove, siding with the party. And rather than saying, oh, hey, my campaign has just confirmed what we all knew about the Democrats. They're basically impenetrable. We need you, all these people who are here at the stadium. I'm doing this live stream now. We got 36 people, which is tremendous. Thank you all for being here. But it's not a stadium audience. Bernie Sanders, on the other hand, had a stadium audience and could have said, hey, we're going to form a left party now. And we're not going to run in 2016, but we're going to run some people in the midterms. And we're going to run some people in 2020. And in 2024, we're going to take over the government at every level. And that would have been a hugely popular movement. He didn't do it. And yeah, so more and more people are realizing the failure of Democrats and liberals. They're gonna, they're controlled by the big bourgeoisie. I don't know what else to say. They're not really fighting the Republicans the way that they say they are. I did a video on Bernie Sanders. He, before the election, was promising, I think he was talking to Crystal Ball, and he was swearing up and down. He's got a 100-day plan to hold Joe Biden accountable. Yeah, I guess that got misfiled, let's say, because that was the last we ever heard of it. Got another comment. CPUSA and DSA are inherently pro-Democratic Party. Yes. However, DSA also runs people who are not Democratic Party. So there's room for it. That's all I'm saying. Also, get in there, build it. And like I said, if it reaches a point where there's tons and tons of members, again, you'll want to go where the action is. If it looks like in the end, the right wing is going to keep control of that name, then do what I was just saying Bernie Sanders should have done. Take your stadium crowd and evacuate. Bring half the party with you into a new party that's not going to do that shit. So, yeah. Again, not splitting into tiny factions, but a major meaningful split where you can actually go do the thing that you want to do without being held back by the right wing if you can't overcome them. So Charmander says, the CPUSA base does not seem pro-Dem, but people like Joe Sims are really holding back the party. Yeah, I mean, people like Joe Sims clearly are, I think, pro-Democrat from what he writes on their blog. Actually, I plan to cover soon. They have an article, and it's always framed as it's a popular front against fascism. Well, can you form a popular front with fascist collaborators like the Democrats? I would say no. I'd say actually no. Also, popular fronts, if you go back to read Dimitrov, who had just did an audiobook on Unity of the Working Class Against Fascism, when he's talking about popular fronts versus united fronts, so united fronts are proletarian alliances, and popular fronts also includes some non-proletarian elements. When he's talking about popular fronts, he's talking about in more agrarian countries where there's more of a populist movement, like a peasant movement, or a populist movement of the urban petty bourgeoisie, which might align with the proletariat. But even within the popular front, like that type of situation, it's because of the lack of development of the proletariat, which is not the case in the USA. The USA is like 90+% proletarianized. It has really nowhere else to go in terms of proletarianizing the country. That's not an excuse. And then, beyond that, you want to keep the proletariat centered in that alliance. Well, that's definitely not what the Democratic Party does. They regularly just tell the proletarian component of their base to just eat shit. So, that's an absurd position. That's coming from their co-chair, Um, Honestly, I think you can find like literally more progressive things from DSA. And again, I want to stress, I do not think DSA is going to be like the final vehicle or the party of the proletariat. I'm just saying in 2022, early 2022, you want some action, you want to go meet people, you want to do some useful work in your community, where are you most likely to find it? That's literally all I'm saying. All right. Comrade Charmander, leadership seems way more liberal than the base. Yeah, I mean, I've watched CPUSA live streams. It was indistinguishable from a Democratic Party live stream. I think that you find, because all they talk about is the Republicans and how, oh, in the interest of protecting bourgeois democracy, we got to come together against the Republican Party. You know, we covered this before. Democrats aren't seriously fighting the Republicans. They're actually keeping them afloat. So, yeah. All right. A lot of it has to do with unions being connected to the state. The state of the labor movement in the United States is horrible. It's been kind of gutted since about 1960. This is it's fallout from McCarthyism, and it never really got rebuilt. And then with the Democratic Party capitulating to capital, they made changes to labor legislation, which made it even harder to start a union. That's why it has never rebounded. It's a majority of workers say, in the last poll I saw from a couple of years ago, that if there was if there was a union in their workplace, they would join it. Yet actual unionization is at like 7%. Well, what's the deal? It's because it's nearly impossible to start a union. That's why. And actually, speaking of the Democrats, they keep saying that they're for like card check, which would vastly simplify the process of starting a union. It means basically, card check, that the way that you get an NLRB, National Labor Relations Board, election to formally declare that you have a union, this is if the employer refuses to recognize it, which they usually don't. You collect A cards, authorization cards. It's from the workers in the proposed bargaining unit that the union would represent. And you say, I, so-and-so, authorize this union to bargain on my behalf. And that's an A card. So basically, card check would be, if you get 50% plus one, which is what's needed to win an election, of the cards, of the A cards, then you can bypass the election. Why is that key? Because it's how long does it take to get an election? Like 6 to 8 weeks. And what happens is employers, even though it's illegal for them to do this, employers routinely use those 6 to 8 weeks as they're coached by anti-union law firms. Labor-busting law firms are plentiful. They're coached to terrorize the union organizers and to get them to quit or to fire them if they can. So what happens in those 6 to 8 weeks is, let's say you got 60% of the proposed bargaining unit to sign the A cards. A lot of times that'll get knocked down 25 or 30% through that terror campaign. So if you had card check, you could skip all that and just get the union. Well, Democrats, even though labor unions are backing them, refuse to do it. So I don't know about the unions being tied to the state, but that's certainly a problem. And labor leadership has been awful for really the entire neoliberal period. But like I said, this goes back to McCarthyism, where if you were a radical of any stripe, you were kicked out of any position of public influence. All right. So every rank and file member that I've talked to has been a great comrade that wants them to run their own candidates for office. Yeah, I agree. I mean, and DSA does run candidates for office sometimes. The other problem with this, too, is, I think, don't endorse Democrats because you don't want to build the Democratic Party. The reality is in electoral politics, and I'm not saying that this is therefore why we have to work with the Dems. I'm saying that it's a shortcoming of electoral politics, whether you're Green or DSA or Independent or whatever, is that you wind up working with the Democrat, unless you just go in and you pull like a Ron Paul, like Dr. No, and you just like oppose them on everything, which probably would be useful, except really if you got them to capitulate and do some kind of major reform. Is I've heard this from people in countries that have more of a parliamentary proportional representation thing, is that in reality in the coalition, like, you wind up having to work with the equivalent of the Democrats anyway. So I mean, yes, we do need to differentiate ourselves from them, and yes, our organizations also cannot be controlled by capital, because electoral politics is just one and possibly minor form of class struggle. So we need people to be organized, not in parties controlled by capital, because running candidates is just one part of it. And if they're in, on all the planning sessions, that's not the best thing. I mean, that's not the only reason, but just, to keep your organization free of that influence. So, so running the candidates is one question. It is just one question, though. So Trotsky was basically just a contrarian. I mean, I get a lot of egoism, honestly, and not egoism in the hyper-individualist sense. I mean, I think Trotsky was real into Trotsky. Just a personal opinion. It is what it is. Stalinism is a red herring used to kill interest in socialism. Yes. Trotsky seemed to be anti-union a lot too. That is possible. I haven't seen it. I don't know. I know, and to their credit, World Socialist website, which is Trotskyist, they do give a lot of coverage to labor unions. So I'm not sure why you think that. Excuse me, but I haven't seen that. DSA is chock full of liberals, apparently. I mean, yes, the whole USA is chock full of liberals. Their international committee posted a good anti-interventionist resolution, and a bunch of supposedly members complained about it. Yeah, DSA has a right wing. Absolutely. They also have a left wing. If anybody does want to check anything out, I sound like running a commercial for DSA. It's not what I'm trying to do. It's just, this is a topic worth discussing. If we're socialists in the United States, let's discuss what's going on. And DSA, for better or worse, is what's going on. They've been able to build an organization. So, yeah, let's talk about it. But they do have a right wing that is full of soc dems who are not internationalist and truly just want healthcare. They don't actually want to end imperialism. They don't want to do anything that would really inconvenience, the living standards of the United States, even in the short term. There's definitely people out there who are kind of these right-wing soc dems that are just want healthcare. Okay, well, I definitely think that we can make them out to be the right-wingers that they are, and fight them by doing that. So yeah, but the International Committee, I was thinking of doing a video on this. They did a pro-North Korea post. They were trying to get the travel ban to North Korea lifted, which apparently Trump put in place in 2017. You're not allowed to go to North Korea. So they want people to be able to travel to North Korea, and they want there to be more peace there. Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's really good. So that's supportable, as long as there's not some weird ulterior motive of trying to get missionaries in there or something. Airwave says, I thought that the Ukraine statement was great. The International Committee is usually pretty good. That has been my experience. That seems to be the consensus. The Lonely Pirate says, you've inspired me to take community action and make my own branch of socialist organizing. Love the audiobooks. Everything you do has measurable value. Well, sure, a few things I do don't have a measurable value, but I do put thought into it, so I'm glad that a lot of it is resonating. And I'm glad that you're doing community action because, again, let reading the theory and history radicalize you. That's the idea, is we look at what people have been able to achieve in the past, and then we look around our current environment, apply scientific socialist analysis to our current environment, and see what can we start to do, because that's how it happens. So sent an email to Workers' World Party, still no reply after a few days. I mean, a few days is one thing. Give it 10 business days. That's kind of standard just in the world. If people are still not getting back to you after 10 business days, that's pretty half-assed. That's like U.S. government standards. No, seriously. But if I've heard people trying to apply to orgs, and they're sending things in month after month. Give up. That's not an org that's functional enough even to take in a new member. I guarantee you do not want to get involved in them. So that's my take on that. Miro says, the idea of them both having problems leaves the same answer said earlier. Join, make connections with decent people, as there are no doubt about some decent ones, then you can bounce later. Yeah, and specifically why I actually see at the current point in time an advantage to the more loosely controlled mass orgs is if you get into a small one where there's lots of demcent, lots of control, and it's not the greatest thing, then you probably have less leeway to actually assert your own opinion. And I know that's not how demcent's supposed to work, but it's how it's often applied in practice in kind of an abusive way. That's not to say that it's always going to do that, but it's a problem we see a lot in a lot of different organizations. Hold on. I gotta like blow my nose. Hold on a second. Okay, I'm back. What was I talking about? Oh yeah. So I was saying, if you get into like a real small, very controlling org, not trying to paint every small org as super controlling because some aren't, and some are just some good comrades that have just gotten started with something. So, just because something's small doesn't mean it's bad. I'm not trying to say that at all. But if you get into an org, let's say that's been around for 100 years, like CPUSA, and not to say they haven't done anything significant since the 1930s or 40s, but when that was your heyday, I'm sorry, but there's a problem. And if it is small and it is very controlling of members' opinions, as some people have said, that hasn't been your experience, I'm happy to hear from you as well. I feel like then is it worth it? Is it worth your time? Because you can only be in one place at a time. You can only have one conversation at a time. Your time is valuable and you should choose wisely where you spend it. So that's why I'm saying, you might have an easier time going into an org that is a little more liberal in its ideology, knowing you kind of got to fight and look for that left wing, than going into one that's ostensibly very ML, and then in practice you can't get anything done. So, if that's not people's experience, I'm happy to hear that too. But I've also heard from people whose experience that is. All right. So just call me Gang. Is that a soft G? Is it Gang or Jang? Gang. I'll call you Gang for now until you correct me. Funky Lollipop says, happy second anniversary, comrade. I found that the best way to open minds to socialism is to be well informed and slow and steady, along with pointing to real-world examples of the harmful effects of capitalism on the proletariat, like not having clean air or drinking water, etc. Yes, thank you for the comment, and couldn't agree more. This is what we call agitation. Agitation is the process of drawing out people's complaints. So like in a workplace, agitation for union is like find the things that people are most likely to spontaneously complain about and then draw that into an analysis of why the workplace would be better off organized. And it's the same thing in the country, organizing against capitalism generally and trying to spread anti-capitalist thought. You connect, because I was going to say you connect socialist theory and history. Socialist history and theory is also people. People think that like Marx just sat down and like farted out a bunch of books. That's not how it happened. Marx was covering popular uprisings back then, like the bourgeoisie overthrew feudalism, and class struggle has just been in existence for a long time. Like Marx didn't make this up, neither did Lenin, Mao, so on. So what they did do was they developed it, they agitated, they elaborated, they studied it, and they presented to people, hey, that thing that you're upset about in your life, yeah, you're right to be upset about it, and here's what's going on in the overall system. And yes, speaking to issues that are important to people, that's absolutely how you gain their support. The Lonely Pirate says, we need to bring back being a card-carrying communist. Laminators are cheap, just write communist on a piece of red paper, chop it down, boom. You're a card-carrying communist, just write communist on it. I don't know. Miro, split off into another party. What are we, trots? Yeah, I know. This is the thing. There used to be a great video on YouTube. And by the way, before I forget, I don't know, that the card-carrying communist, this could become a thing. Post it on Twitter. Just take a red piece of paper, or a piece of paper write in red, communist. Fucking laminate it or don't. Just put some packing tape on it. Say I'm a card-carrying communist. This may be a dumb idea, but maybe it's not. I don't know. Anyway, split out. Yeah, what are we, Trots? There was a great video about Trotskyism, came out of the UK, where there are apparently like a ton of Trotsky sects. And one of the things I was surprised to learn, not only is there one Fourth International, there are like as many Fourth Internationals as there are Trotskyist parties. It's like every party has like its own Fourth International. I'm sorry, that's a joke, so yeah. Charmander says, do you think that the lack of leftism in the U.S. is a failure of the left? is a result of people's material conditions in the imperial core. I think it's both and more the former. I think that there has been massive revisionism. I was just doing a Mao file the other day about how, at different points in the Chinese communist struggle in the 30s, so like well before the revolution, that there was a time where the party hit an impasse, and then they liquidated the revisionist elements, and then the revolution proceeded. Well, I think that that hasn't really happened. I think that what we've wound up with, and I can speak more on this later as we like cover it more, and frankly I read more about it. But you had kind of like the revisionist, more like rightist types, like CPUSA was well known after World War II for having like a lot of right deviations. Then you had the anti-revisionists, and the rightists were just like, there was no kind of like harmony or resolution to this at all. The revisionists like had their organizations, and then the anti-revisionists had their organizations, but like, and arguably did go kind of ultra left, and so like there were problems with that as well, and so it didn't really like result in the movement as a whole resuming its momentum. It just kind of resulted in like division. So that's part of it. I mean, also the situation in the U.S., it's kind of both, right? So material conditions in the imperial core, there's a lot of layers is what I was going to say. You have capitalism that is built on the importing of the African nation into the United States to be slave labor, and now like second class still, more exploited labor, like ultra exploited labor, super exploited labor. And then on top of that, you have the genocide of indigenous nations. So it's really like multi-tiered. I don't think that anyone. So those are the material conditions. So kind of like everybody sort of has their own grievances, and it's hard to like line those up, which goes into the. I mean, not that it can't be done. It can. But then that kind of goes into the failure of the left leadership. It's a hard, tricky task from the start. And I don't know that anybody has done it that successfully. Plus, then you get the buy-off of the boomers, the me generation, who did get a pretty sweet deal, the golden age of social democracy, which is basically a 2-generation deal from like the 30s to the 70s. And the boomers are still, the ones that are hanging around, are still looking at us younger people like, what are you complaining about? Just, go buy some apartment buildings and charge rent. It's super easy, dude. And they're really, really, really out of touch. So, those are the people who've been in the leadership for like a long time. Not to say to a person that's the way it's been, but we've had like a very reactionary U.S. public for like a long time. I mean, you can literally write like a 1,000-page book on this topic. So I think it's definitely both. There's a complex set of material conditions in the United States, probably more complex than in many comparable countries, comparable in terms of level of development, that I just don't think anybody has hit on it yet, although I am inspired and encouraged by for example, the pushback that the, quote, socialist patriots, right deviationists got this year. And actually, while we're talking about CPUSA, I want to make another point. Joe Sims himself made a fucking post on socialist patriotism, basically making the exact same arguments like 4 or 5 years ago. So, I mean, and then there was massive Twitter pushback, so maybe he got pulled left. But I mean, that's the way CPUSA was going too, as of just a few years ago. So I don't know, is that holding up the revolution? Obviously we're not near revolution, but is that holding up development? Yeah, probably. Anyway. Base God Flashy. Doesn't Dimitrov call for a worker and farmers party in the U.S.? Yeah, maybe in the 1930s when he was writing. We don't really have farmers anymore. I mean, unless you're counting Monsanto. He said it should not be a socialist or communist party, but also at the same time not be anti-communist. Personally, I don't 100% agree. I think it should be a communist party, but maybe he was specifically talking about a front against fascism. Yeah, that was his big thing, was the United Front versus Populist Front. And I was talking about that before. Maybe that's when this comment was from. I'm not sure. But yeah, he was basically saying in different countries, sometimes you're going to have a united front of purely proletarian elements against fascism. And sometimes you're going to have more of a popular front, but mainly in countries where the proletariat isn't developed yet. So like for example, in the Soviet Union, why was it the hammer and sickle? The sickle represented the peasantry, and the hammer the urban proletariat. It's because the proletariat, while it made sense for Marxists to center the proletarian leadership, because that is the future under capitalism, and also the future under socialism is the proletariat as the ruling class. The peasantry is not going to be one of the great classes in capitalism or socialism. They still existed, and in that case, the proletariat wasn't developed enough. Proletarianization had just not advanced enough. So the proletariat, wasn't a significant enough proportion of the population. In other words, the class composition of the country did not include a huge proletariat. Therefore, the proletariat needed to make alliances with other potentially anti-fascist classes. So, hence the alliance between the proletarians and the peasantry. But in the United States, that hasn't been the case for an incredibly long time. So, yeah, he was writing in the 1930s. And, workers, you still had farmers back then. Although a lot of farmers were being eradicated during the Dust Bowl. It was, that was the first kind of huge wave of capitalists centralizing agricultural production and kind of the beginnings of agribusiness, if you will. So even at that time, that was kind of on the way out. And like I said, populism, it's not a proletarian ideology, really. You could say that in the 1880s, 1890s, when you had more of the populist movement, okay, fine, there wasn't as big of a proletariat back then. And also just Marxism wasn't as commonly known and widespread. But by the time you're in the 1930s, 1940s, and especially after, especially in the 2020s, you're saying you're a populist. You might as well just say you're an anti-communist because, you're probably a proletarian, or maybe you're petty bourgeois, saying that. A lot of the populists are petty bourgeois now. Anyway, but yeah, in the front against fascism, yes, if the proletarian numbers aren't big enough, then yeah, you sometimes need that popular front. They got a redo at Bessemer, and they seem pretty optimistic. To be honest, I don't know why Bessemer, the name is familiar. It's eluding me at the moment. Who's Bessemer? I'll just ask outright. Anyway, Unhelpful Heap says, hello, first of all, Unhelpful Heap. Another problem with unionization is that companies have cut their overall numbers of employees and increased their numbers of contract labor, which don't offer the same protections. This has effectively splintered unionization efforts. That's a very good point. It doesn't help also that in the U.S. you can hire permanent, quote, temporary replacement workers. Other countries, like if workers go on strike, the capitalists aren't always allowed to just replace them permanently. In the U.S., you can. So basically, that's legal. So just the whole scope and landscape of the labor struggle is very different here. It's very much skewed against labor. But this is another good point of using independent contractors, or not just legally independent contractors, although they do that too, but using contract labor that isn't eligible for unionization. That's another way. And I think that this has been going on long enough that the labor movement needs to adapt. I know that a lot of the big labor unions are really constrained by what they can or can't do legally, although respect for that kind of stuff isn't that isn't what got the labor union as far as it did. Something like, for example, the Wobblies, they do a lot of unofficial organizing, and that way workers of any sort of legal status or contract status can still join a union and organize efforts. So being organized and being capital U unionized in the U.S. labor law sense aren't necessarily the same thing. And I think workers definitely need to broaden class struggle and will need to. Conditions are getting awful. So I think people will be pushed into that more and more. And we need to be there to help along that process. Absolutely. Be encouraging, add moral support, and, do education. Airwave says, didn't the Teamsters just elect socialist leadership? I do not know. Stevia333 says the Dem Party is a corporation based on a lawsuit about primaries, so working with them is more like a hostile takeover than I think coalition parliamentary experience is. Yeah, that, and they just keep repeatedly saying I mean, like I said before, Bernie Sanders had the 100-day plan to hold Joe Biden accountable. It went completely out the window. Everything that they promised, they did not do in terms of concessions to the left. Biden was basically bragging like, we won without the left. We don't need you. So, yeah, I mean, they don't care. And Bernie Sanders wasn't the first person to show this either. He was just the most visible example and the most recent example. But there's always some progressive maverick that's trying to change the party, and it never works. Never. Yeah. I can't emphasize that enough. But Bernie Sanders did it, in the most televised way, and I mean that including like YouTube and all that stuff. Like, there's more documentation of how you can have a massively popular movement, and you just can't do it because the Dems, no matter how many votes you get, will just say, no, fuck you, we're a party for the big bourgeoisie. I couldn't agree more. It's never going to work. Airwave says, Socialist Equality Party wrote some negative shit about the CTU strike here. Seemed unfair. Okay, so that's where you're coming from. Yeah, I don't know what that was. I didn't see that. Last I saw, they were saying some positive things, so I don't know. Gang says, cleaned up my books, set up a new bookcase for them, organized by authors. Yes, having well-organized reading stacks like I do with all my, digital stuff I pull off of MIA and stuff. Like, the more you organize it, the more you handle your stuff. Like, I know this isn't true for everyone, but for a lot of people, like, out of sight, out of mind is a very real thing. So keeping things in front of you for a lot of people can be helpful. And, yeah, if it helps you do more reading, do whatever it is that helps you do more reading. Lonely Pirate says, I will @ you on Twitter when I laminate my card. You do follow me, so I'm sure you'll see it. Yeah, do. And feel free to DM as well, or DM the post so I can retweet it. That'd be kind of fun. I mean, just, card-carrying communists. I don't think there's any major point to this. It'd just be kind of fun. Red Wizard. Anyone who is interested in a good historical run of the Chinese Revolution should check out People's History of Ideas podcast. It starts off from the Opium Wars. The episodes are only a half hour, but with so much context that recommended books and citation is always in the show notes. And then they have posted the link there, which I think got... Oh, I must have this set that people can't post links because it just showed up as asterisks. But I think I have that link, and I'll see if I can share it. I have not listened to that yet. It's very long. It's like over 6 hours long, but I've heard good things. Oh, I got to clear my throat again. All right. I think we're coming to the end because I've been going for 2 hours and 22 minutes. And I will be doing this again because I have to, for the Twitch thing that I'm trying to do, I have to stream on like 7 different occasions for a total of 8 hours. So I'll definitely do this again. This has actually been pretty fun. Let's see. Miro Bessemer is Alabama Amazon unionization vote. Yeah, so the Amazon union, I do retweet whatever I can about that. That's very encouraging. There's also been Starbucks unionization going on as well. That is encouraging. This really does need to spread. I mean, the U.S. labor movement is kind of, I think, at an all-time low, like since the labor movement came into existence. For comparison, if you go back to like the Knights of Labor days, this is like pre-IWW, like very, very, early, like the late 19th century. They had they would make, not only would they organize workers, they had like a whole network of cooperatives even that they owned. Like the state of the labor movement today, I can't emphasize how bad it is. So like I said, people think that we're going to do some like internet ML party and that's going to be the fucking answer. You're totally ego stroking. I'm not saying we don't need parties ever, but like, I think this is putting the cart before the horse in a major way. And it's kind of just a symptom of like extremely online activity. For my thing, like I say, Rev 2030, I think we need like a solid decade of like really, intense outreach and education before the working class as a whole has any kind of morale again, has any kind of organization again, and maybe then some kind of, Marxist Party can start giving it some good guidance, but like for fuck's sake, like things are just decimated, and in the true sense, this is nerdy, but like decimation, it's related to like decimal. It means to reduce to a tenth. That's pretty much literally what has happened with the U.S. labor movement. Anyway, Base God Flashy, yeah, I think Dimitrov would have a different opinion now. Thankfully, I haven't seen many Pat Sock's opinions. Or sorry, misreading. The text is like tiny. I'm mixing up lines. I haven't seen many Pat Socks try to quote that, mostly because they don't read, but I could see how they could attempt to cite the Workers' and Farmers' Party thing today. I mean, isn't that the thing with Pat Socks? Like, nothing they do, it's always distorted. Like, it's always taken out of context somehow. They're never applying real analysis, because why? The whole thing is just trying to gin up reasons and excuses to coddle up to fascists. That's what it's about. All right. And it's not relevant at this point. There are way less farmers today than then. Yeah. I mean, there's kind of like a back to the land thing where people are doing like local food, but I mean, it's not like it was. I fear an explicitly non-communist party would just end up being tailism, economism at best, and fascism at worst. And yeah, and I would say under current conditions, where there's so much right-wing populism, fascism probably is what you would get. So like I said, hopefully we can take this decade to steer things in a different direction. But, I don't know if things really went big before now, if it would even stay socialist. So, Gang says, thoughts on the so-called freedom truckers in Canada? I mentioned that before. I'm halfway through a video now on that. I've done a half an hour so far, and I just have to finish it off talking about the Russell Brand. I'm going to do like a commentary reaction video to the Russell Brand video, which is one of the worst fucking pieces of shit I have ever seen. Awful. Yeah, so the Freedom Truckers, or the what do they call it? The Flu Trucks Clan. Awful, awful, awful. Yeah, it's headed by like extreme right-wingers who are involved in the Canadian Wexit movement, which is like the Western provinces secession movement. It, to me, mirrors things like the Northwest Territorial Imperative in the United States, which is like a white ethno-state proposed for the rural Northwest, like Montana and Idaho and places like that. People sometimes think of like Seattle and Portland, and like they're kind of progressive because they're cities. But if you go to eastern Washington, Oregon, and Northern California too, where there's actually they're trying to make a state like this is I don't know if it's part of the Cascadia thing or what, but it was like militia, right-wing militia. I mean, are there anything but right-wing militias really today? I know there's like SRA, but honestly, as far as like organized militias, is there anything but right-wing ones? There's like militia members, elected to county government that are trying to like, have Shasta County secede. These are not positive developments. So the people involved with the Freedom Convoy, as in the leaders of it, are involved with the Populist Party there, the Maverick Party. These are like basically neo-Nazi groups. You get into what they do, it's like QAnon stuff. It is 5G conspiracy, anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ, and of course anti-vaccine, because the anti-vaccine movement has been around for as long as vaccines have been around, and it's been fascist the whole fucking time. So those are some of my thoughts. You can hear the rest of them when the video is done. They've also been horrible to indigenous people. That's like a whole subsection of the video. I'm not going to try to do justice to it now. There's some video of them like doing like a fake, it's all white people, like doing like a drum circle, and they're like yelling yabba dabba doo as the chant. Like it's hideously, but the anyway, insight I tried to lend to the thing was that these people are products of the system. I mean, this is what fucking, whether it's Canada or the United States, this is what the system produces. They need fucking mindless individualist thinkers that, not individualist in the sense of they're thinking for themselves, but that they're embracing individualism, but just these kind of mindless, they think that they're going against the system. They're really just getting played by the big bourgeoisie, or like the most reactionary parts of the big bourgeoisie. So that's who's behind the Freedom Truckers. It's a very reactionary movement. Comrade Charmander, do I have any thoughts on Brian Becker, Breakthrough News, and PSL? I saw Caleb Maupin shitting on them, saying that they're parroting MSNBC narratives about January 6th that are pro-police state. Well, I'm sure Caleb Maupin would say that, wouldn't he, about January 6th. So first of all, Just because the Democrats are, sanctimoniously condemning January 6th, even though they're not fighting the Republicans at the root level that they could be, does not mean that January 6th was a positive development in U.S. history. It absolutely does not. And this kind of like half-baked analysis that people who say that January 6th was a concerning development are pro-police state. Look, we got a fucking police state now, okay? And the cops were actually helping the insurrectionists. Like, that's not, the people who were there, part of that 1-6 thing, they're not like anti-cop. I don't know if you know that. They're actually wannabe cops. The cops favor them over any other group of protesters you could possibly imagine because they're right-wingers who don't want to challenge private property rights in any meaningful way, if at all. In fact, they're anti-communist. So fuck Caleb Maupin, first of all. And, Breakthrough News, I generally like Breakthrough News. I think they have really interesting guests on. As a general rule, obviously exercise critical thought, but I don't see them trying to go the, fascist route that other people seem to be going. As far as End PSL, I know that there are some overlapping personalities between Breakthrough News and PSL. I don't think it's everyone, so I don't know. I had somebody mention that BT News is like an outgrowth of PSL. I don't know if that's actually accurate though. But if that is the case, I think that it speaks well of PSL, honestly, because I kind of like BT News. So, for what it's worth. But, fuck Caleb Maupin, and fuck everybody else that's trying to, run cover for 1-6 just because Democrats are talking about it. Yeah, Democrats actually aren't wrong. Where they're wrong is that they're fucking keeping the people behind 1-6 alive by refusing to stamp them out politically. So, because they're both controlled by the big bourgeoisie. But, no, they're not a friend of the people. Fascist coups are not good for socialists, and fuck anybody saying that. The Lonely Pirate says, Ilhan Omar said at her favorite that her female... Oh, yeah. Sorry, I cannot speak right now. I'm going for 2.5 hours, but let's try this word by word. I'll sound it out. Ilhan Omar said at her favorite... that's what's throwing me, too. That her favorite female politician was Maggie Thatcher. This is from the, quote, progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Yeah, Democrats suck, no doubt. And yes, I did a video on that Ilhan Omar thing. Actually, I got some shit from some of the bread tubers who do watch. Okay. Maybe, you kids aren't ready for that, but a lot of people were. Airwave says, we stream every night and it's a lot of fun. There's a good crowd. They could really use your insights. Honestly, yeah, this isn't bad. Dan says, Dan is back. What are my thoughts on Xi Jinping? Is China moving in the correct direction with him? I think wait and see. Are there things that, I just don't know. I do not read any Chinese language, so aside from a few words, I really cannot I can't get in there and see what's going on. I'm really on the outside of it, so I don't know. The best I can say is I started reading The Governance of China, the 2014 book that is a compilation of Xi Jinping's speeches and kind of statements, and I just didn't get into it. That said, I want to read more. I do want to do the Made in China 2025 thing. There's kind of a 30-page PDF about that. I am interested in it. I think China, let's put it this way. I know as much as anybody else watching China, I think that there are some very exciting developments. They have put a lot of emphasis on e-commerce, seeing that as the future and trying to be the world leader in e-commerce technology. I think that they are definitely succeeding in that as far as I can tell. So it seems to me that as far as are they moving in the current direction, they seem to be meeting their goals. So assuming that the leadership is running off of any kind of a correct plan, then I'd say yes, that they seem to be meeting their goals. As far as do they have the correct goals, I don't know because I'm not inside the China, Communist Party of China. So I wish I knew more. In fact, I really wish that they did share more. In fact, there was a book that came out really recently. Oh, and I can't remember the thought. It's a really long, characteristically kind of Chinese title in terms of, the thoughts of Chairman Xi Jinping regarding such and such thought concerning the current conditions of blah, blah, blah. I forget what it is, but it's like it's not available in English. I would read it right away if it was. So anyway, yeah. I mean, so I think yes, it seems to me that China is moving. I get that there is a basis of criticism of China. For example, like I know a lot of the Philippine Maoists are not liking the alliances or like the kind of aid that China gives to the government that they're fighting. And I understand from their perspective why they would not be happy about that. I also see that China is embarking on a potentially totally dramatically world shifting infrastructure project. And I don't know. I mean, I see them do other things. Like they helped Israel build a subway system. Why the fuck are you helping Israel? I don't see what the upside is there. So I see some honest cause for concern. I also feel like I want to see them build the Belt and Road and see what happens with that. So anyway. Continuing, rural Washington, Oregon is straight up Turner Diaries. Yeah, that's kind of what I have surmised from that. Airwave says Becker's a smart dude. He has good takes from what I've seen, referring to BT News. Yeah, like if I'm watching news, that's one of the things that I tend to watch. They have really interesting guests on there that I just don't see a lot of other people consistently having on. There's no need to watch a Jimmy Dore or some shit like that. So anyway, that's my opinion. Stevia says, secession is literally a legal argument for something that can't fit in the legal system. Fascists and their hierarchies are so weird. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but if you're saying that they're trying to make things legal, like through seceding, they're trying to make things legal within their new country that they can't make legal now. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Airwave says those Maupin types feel the need to take the GOP side in every culture war conflict. Yeah, I mean, that's why, people are going to be like, if this stream ever does go out, people are like, what do you have against Caleb Maupin? What are you saying? Like, fuck Caleb Maupin, blah, blah, blah. Because every time, I don't know, that I hear from him, like, I don't listen to Caleb Maupin, but every time that I do hear from him, or that I hear from people who are, like, avowed Maupin fans, it's always some fucking right-wing garbage. So I don't know, maybe if I wasn't hearing that constantly from them, then I wouldn't say shit like that. Anyway, whatever. Caleb blocked me a while ago on Twitter, and that's fine. He wants to go do his thing, whatever. I'm not, I might do some Caleb Maupin book reviews at some point, but, my existence hardly revolves around it. So, Red Wizard, I like BT's content. Take it for what it is. I agree. Charmander says, I was just going to say, I recently discovered Becker. He seems awesome. I saw one of his co-hosts on his podcast support gun control, so I was wondering. So, okay, let's talk about gun control. First of all, it's a wedge issue, so let's not get over-invested. Are there some kinds of gun control that might make sense in the United States in the current climate, that when there's, so much gun violence at schools, etc., I mean, should something be done about that, whether it's education or whatever it is? I mean, it's a problem. Whether you're just going to do a public health campaign about gun safety, I don't know. I understand, support, never giving up the rights of the workers to be armed and so forth. At the current situation, we are having a problem. So I do think something needs to be done about it. I don't know what they were saying specifically about gun control, so I can't speak to that. But I mean, I do think gun violence is a problem in the United States. It's hard to say that it isn't. What you're going to do about it is another question. I am not this person. Welcome says, what do I think about Marxism, Leninism, Maoism? Not Marxism, Leninism with Mao thought thrown in. We're going to maybe cover this on the channel later. What do I think about it? I think that some of the criticisms about it are worthwhile, and I think that some of the insights, and perspectives that it has are worthwhile. And specifically, just to follow that up, this person asked some follow-up clarifying questions. Do I think that the revolutions in India and the Philippines are supportable? And I hear you on Doran Pacman. Maupin wrote an anti-Semitic book. I mean, yeah, it's veiled, and we'll see. I like I said, I may review it. Okay, so Maoism and Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, particularly in the context of India and the Philippines. I feel like I'm just going to speak to India. Excuse me. I'm far from an expert on what's going on in India. I have seen the maps that indicate that there's sort of like Maoist insurrections spreading throughout India. Like there's more activity. It's more widespread now than it was several years ago. I feel like India is very underdeveloped. People live in horrible conditions in India. If like the Maoist approach is going to work in India, fucking great. You know what I mean? Like what I want to see is world revolution. What I want to see is capitalism extinguished. And maybe we can end on this actually. What I want to see is capitalism extinguished. And if some particular approach and orgs with a particular ideology are able to achieve the most traction in one country, and in other countries they're complete and utter failures, whether it's just because of happenstance of who the leadership is, or because it's the conditions don't support that type of resistance and don't support that type of campaign, whatever the deal. But like if it's working in India, then fucking so be it. That's kind of my approach. And so I don't think it makes sense to be against anything across the board. So I guess that's what I'm saying is like, if India were to turn communist, that would be fucking gigantic. Because between China and India, you've got like half the population of the world. Not quite, but like, I think honestly, you look at things like the anti-China alliance of the Quad, of like the U.S. and Japan. Was it U.S., Japan, Australia, and India? I mean, if you were to take India out of that equation, fucking it's a bunch of imperialists standing around jerking each other off. That's all it is. They're just talking. So, I understand India is like too poor to kind of do any real war against a country as advanced as China. But I mean, they're having huge general strikes in India. They can mobilize 250 million people. I think India going socialist would be fucking amazing. So if the Maoists are going to lead that, great. If somebody else leads it, great. I just want to see it happen. Yeah, so, the pirate's saying we can hash it out when capitalism's dead. That's kind of how I feel. If you're talking about in the first world, I don't think any of us, like there haven't been any revolutions in the first world. So we haven't even figured out what works for us yet. So, it is what it is. That's why I keep an open mind. Like, do I think some of the criticisms of Maoism, like that it's ultra left or sometimes adventurous, is some of that true? Yeah, probably some of that's true in some cases. Do I also think that some of their insights about the revisionist right deviations are true? Yeah. Also, yeah. I think that, again, in the United States, we have not come anywhere close to a revolution. And in fact, it's probably the most reactionary country on earth. The only country I think might possibly be more fucked up than the United States is Israel. But really, it's close. Just in terms of like you pull an average person on the street to the side, like fucking ask them their political opinions. Where are you going to get the worst political opinions, like most right-wing opinions? Probably the U.S. and Israel. I don't know that you'd get worse opinions like on average anywhere else. So, maybe when we figure out what fucking works for us, we can start dictating to other people. That's why I'm saying it's like, so I'm not down with the Maoist thing of like China's a completely fucking lost cause. I don't think that. Do I think that there are things like that are eyebrow raising? Yes. Also a lot of things that I think if they succeed at pulling off the Belt and Road, which I think would be a death knell for imperialism, like, am I willing to forgive some of that stuff that maybe didn't make sense at the time? Yeah. So again, though, I think that we're on the outside of a lot of it. We're a bunch of people sitting in the U.S. or Canada or like wherever and trying to figure this stuff out. I think that's admirable of us, and we're trying to educate our fellow proletarians within our cultures, within our countries, who speak our languages. And I think that we should keep doing that. I think it's great that we're doing that. But, and I think also, like, our analysis shouldn't be disregarded. But that is to say, we don't always have all the information, so... Oh, yeah, the Abby Martin interviews in Israel. That's what I'm talking about. But it's like, it's not just that. I mean, I've known a lot of people, too, who are like very pro-Israel, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, like it's just bad. No pun intended there. Anyway, yeah, the means justify the ends essentially. No, I wouldn't entirely say that. Like, you have to be on remotely on track to be socialist. What I'm saying is that I think if you zoom out from like a historical perspective, a lot of these conflicts are like not as significant as we might be making them out to be. That's what I'm saying. The U.S. is the country that allows Vosh to call himself a leftist. Yeah, it's kind of what I'm saying. And I think it was from those Abby Martin Israel interviews. She interviewed some like Israeli Marxists, and they were like, the left here, there is no left. The people who call themselves left are like incredible colonizer imperialists, and like that's kind of what you get from the U.S. too. I would love to see that change in like the next 10 or 15 years, and that's what I'm saying about Rev 2030. Like, socialists need to do like hit social media hard and organize in your communities and like get the education out there, so that hopefully there is some kind of left to speak of. It's been a long time. So let's see. I had no idea it was that bad. I found Maupin from him debating Vosh and thought he was a tanky, but the more I learn, the worse it gets. I mean, yeah, it's pretty bad. Like, if you go through his comment sections, you'll just look at the fucking names of the people like commenting there regularly. It's not good. Same thing on Infracell. The fucking people commenting there. It's like Dugan Enjoyer, or like a traditional fascist was one of my favorites. It's like, dude, your fucking audience is fascist. Like, if I was doing sincere analysis and my audience was consistently turning up as fascists, I'd be like, what am I doing wrong? They're not. Anyway, let's see. Yeah, it's not as subtle as people think. It's definitely not. I remember Maupin last year, I think it was like doing a thing about Christmas in the USA. It was like something about, the title is like U.S. Christmas is very Odinist. I was like, dude, you like scream when people say that you're a fascist, and then you're doing videos like Christmas in the U.S. is very Odinist. It's very Odinist, and you're just like, does anyone except for like neo-pagan fash make videos like that? I'm not saying every neo-pagan is fascist, but you know what I'm talking about. Like, who else is that content for? It's so obvious. But then it's like you get these fucking people sea-lining like, oh yeah, where did he ever say a fascist thing? Where? Oh, can you even say? No, you're just lying because you hate him and blah, blah, blah. Anyway. I think we'll leave it there. Somebody, I'm not this person, saying, I think being anti-imperialist is obviously necessary. Yes, and sometimes you have to support countries that are not strictly socialist, but in a limited and critical way. But he takes it to where he will defend Dugin and the Ayatollahs, not the struggles within the countries to being leftist, etc., being critically supportive. No, I know what you're saying. Yeah, and Airwave Varg on the like pagan thing. Totally. Anyway, it's just and to get that hostile when people call it out, like, we don't fucking know what your dog whistles are. Like, you're using like all these dog whistles for fascists, and like then people call it out, and you're like, oh, yeah, maybe I just like Odin, okay? Maybe I'm just into Norse mythology. Yeah, okay, maybe. No, it makes sense. Lenin's position was support the proletariat turning against the imperialists in World War I, not joining with the imperialists and fighting each other. And I get the kind of hair splitting over, like, is Russia truly imperialist or blah, blah, blah? Is it part of the U.S. EU imperialist bloc, whatever. Okay, I get that. At the same time, should we be supporting the proletariat against its, leadership? Like, should we be trying to center the proletariat in that anti-imperialist coalition? These are questions I think that need to be elaborated on and hashed out. The against socialist patriotism in imperialist countries was a good step. I think that we need to go further, and Caleb is socialism with American characteristics, and to be clear, that's not a good thing. Yeah, I hear that. Well, it's the, why, again, more from a Maoist perspective, but like I said, I think sometimes the things are spot on. Paul Morin, now Marxist Paul, has a video on why are we not patriotic in imperialist countries. This overlaps with that. It's like socialism with American characteristics. You don't rally under the bourgeois flag and slogans. But yeah, what I was saying about the support for the proletariat against the imperialists. Now, in World War One, it was kind of like the capitalists were the imperialists, so that now the way that this is being framed is the proletariat has to choose between supporting the capital I imperialists of the U.S. and NATO versus the capitalists. But like, if capitalism in the 21st century is imperialism, small I imperialists, like it's not imperialist in the same way that the U.S. is, clearly. Is it a national resistance movement? Like, is it a national liberation movement, though? What's like ruling Russia? Anyway, the point is, I think that this needs to be elaborated on better, and that sort of discussion needs to be had in the community as a whole. And so, if we're looking at, the question of back in the World War I days, the proletariat turning against the imperialists rather than being on their side and supporting one imperialist over the other. How do we translate that to today, in the U.S. EU versus Russia-China conflict? So, I mean, I think with China, there's much less of a question, much more so with Russia. And, how do we support the proletariat? I think in China, you can, and I know that the more of the Maoists are going to disagree on this, and that's fine. I'm open to your disagreement. But I think in the case of China, you just basically support China. In the case of Russia, which China is allying with economically and in development of the Belt and Road, what do you do there? It's like they're partners of China. And, I'd love to see China doing more support of the Russian proletariat in terms of that. We talked about that in the Kazakhstan video. I don't think that there are easy answers to this. If there are easy answers, I haven't heard them yet. And like I said, I think that this needs to be elaborated on to get some correct positions out there, because the positions out there that seem the most correct, to me, they still leave too much room for good faith criticism and interpretation. In other words, I don't think that the best answers I've heard are as satisfying as they really need to be as compelling as they need to be. So there's that. Foreign Languages Press has good books on the struggles in India, Philippines, and leftist struggles in Iran, etc. Yeah, I know that that's a big favorite among the sort of MLM world, and they are free. I mean, you can get cheap hard copies, but also that. Like I said, once I get, I'm doing that block of early Marx and Engels, then a block of Trotsky, Stalin, Bukharin, like early Soviet Union after Lenin. After that, I plan to get into more of the anti-revisionist struggles of the 60s, 70s, and on. So those are some plans for the channel. But we've been going for almost 3 hours, and honestly, this has been awesome. Really good questions, and we've been averaging over 30 people listening to this for most of the time, 34 currently listening. So thanks to everybody for showing up. If you missed it before, I'm not really planning on live streaming all the time. I mean, I probably wind up repeating myself a lot, Not one of these people who's out to just listen to me. That's not really what I'm trying to do. I do those audiobooks and stuff for a reason, because I think, we're trying to do that education. This isn't about listen to me personally at all. But I do need to do a certain amount of streaming to get Twitch where I can upload videos. So I will be doing more this month. No, I definitely will not become a streamer. Trust me. I think the occasional stream, this has been great for just blowing through some topics that maybe, I wouldn't sit down and do the whole video production process on, but I can just sort of, boom, get it out there. And, it's keeping the dialogue and the conversation alive without sitting down to do a formal video. So that's cool. Also, though, once we get through this month of more streaming, maybe I'll do these once a month or something just to catch up. But Airwaves, thank you for doing the channel shoutouts at least once a day. No, I mean, somebody's doing something to plug this channel. I mean, I used to plug it on Facebook. I plug it on Twitter. I plug it on Reddit now. Reddit. I think I said Reddit. This is, like I said, this is why I don't do my videos all in one take, because I misspeak often, as I think anyone does. But the community has been great as far as helping us spread the word about the channel. Really, the channel wouldn't be as big as it is without all of your support and without all of your participation. which know that just subbing to the channel, just liking the video, just leaving good video, thanks, or a question in the comments, it actually helps other people to see this content. So, and then from there, more people start their own channels and the community grows, and Rev 2030, people are getting drawn into this movement more and more, and we need to just help it along. So anyway, I think I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for all of the questions and all of the participation. I will probably be doing this again soon because I got to do 7 streams, this being the first in 30 days. So I don't know, I might do like 1 or 2 a week for the next month. Stay posted on the Patreon or the YouTube posts or the Twitter to see when I'll be on again next, maybe in like a week or so. But yeah, just see a couple of comments coming in. Thanks for the live stream and good crowd. I agree. I was like, being the first live stream, I didn't know if it was going to get crashed by like a bunch of people like, fucking debate infrared. It was like some shit. That'll probably come later once word gets out. But no, really not big on debate. Particularly with, I did a whole video on this when I covered the Jason Unruh, who, I'm not criticizing Jason Unruh for this, by the way, but the Jason Unruh versus Infracell debate, just the way that these like debate bros, and I don't think Jason Unruh is a debate bro, but the way that they do things of just like, here's 2 people who are trying to score points on each other, and they're going to like set each other up in as many like bad faith situations, as many bad faith hypotheticals as they possibly can, and then just try to like bash on one another. And I don't think you learn anything from doing that. It's not a collaborative, cooperative experience at all. I think that people just fucking double down in situations like that, and you wind up with people being more wrong and more closed-minded than they were when they went in. So yeah, not big on debates as we know them. If you have a good faith conversation with somebody you basically agree with, that's one thing. But that's also not a debate. Or if you're going to do a debate in the formal sense of like, have a question, one person takes pro, one person takes con, and you're not like personally fucking invested, like all your internet clout is like invested in that. That's one way to do it. Do like, even if you do a debate, but do it as in like an actual formal debate, but not, as Beluga Pop is saying, a personality drama. Yeah, do it as an actual debate where it's actually about the idea, and you're not allowed to just make like utter fucking bullshit points, and then you just have like 2 different cults of personality fucking clashing with each other. Like that's nonsense. That you don't learn anything from that. It doesn't get you anywhere that you weren't before. Maybe it even sets you back. All right, well, again, we won't be doing that on this channel. We'll be doing just some questions and, I probably won't be doing stuff that I don't otherwise do in videos, but maybe we can just, if the videos are the bricks, maybe the live stream can be some of the mortar, just sort of filling in the cracks and holding things together. But I am going to head out. We're at 2 hours and 58 minutes. So thanks once again. And I usually say I'll catch you in the next video. Catch you in the next live stream, but we'll also see you on the channel. If you're not following the Twitter already, you might want to, because after the YouTube videos, I'm probably on Twitter the next most often. I'm on Reddit, but I don't really use it. I just kind of put videos up there, so that's where to find me. So I guess that's it for now. Thanks to everybody again, and I have no idea how to end this, so bye for now.